Again, usually people don't get up at 8 o'clock in the morning on a summer and end up in the wrong place, but especially since you have to get onto our Canvas site to be able to do this. But welcome to Anatomy and Physiology. I am Dr. Daniel Slutsky. I will be your instructor and slash torturer for the next 8 weeks. So this is, again, as many of you have heard from email or otherwise. Oh, actually, real quick, that's an important question. Has anybody here not received at least one email? You should have all gotten at least a handful of emails from me. Is there anybody who has not received at least one email from me over the past week and a half? All right, excellent. Well, not everybody's here yet, so there could still be some people, but excellent. Then you've seen the primary way I'm going to communicate with you. We have the announcements on Canvas. I encourage you strongly to set up your notifications on Canvas so that when an assignment gets graded or when I post an announcement or some date, due date or something like that gets changed, you get that notification. But also in our e-services, I have a way to contact the students from that. And so important announcements will be posted as announcements in the Canvas site, but also will be sent via that contact. So make sure you have it set up. If you've got it set up for your Los Rios email, you can have it set up where it will forward to whatever your normal email is. So if you don't check the Los Rios one very often, you can forward it to your Gmail or whatever else that it is that you're using as well. All right, when you log in on the morning, what you will see is something that looks a whole lot like this, and this will be the whiteboard that we'll have set up our game plan for the day. Like today, we have the attendance quiz, and again, if you have not taken the attendance quiz, please do that, because if you do not, you will be dropped from the class, or you will not be able to add the class. You'll lose your priority to add the class. The access code for that is FIRE. So as we will frequently have daily quizzes either at the beginning of class or at the very end of class. So it is important to be here on time. It is important to stay through the entire lecture. If you miss those quizzes, there will not be something that will be able to be made up. Typically, there are 5 points. And again, 5 points shouldn't make or break anybody's grade, but it does add up. You want to maximize your points on this. On those days, well, like you see here, I'll have the announcement, I'll have the access code, and I'll remind you, usually we'll start 5 to 10 minutes late to give everybody the opportunity to take them. They start at the beginning of class at 8 o'clock, but typically I open them at 7:45. So if you want to get on early, see if there's a quiz, take it, and then you can just leave it on and run and go get your coffee or whatever. Like the attendance quiz, they won't be proctorioed. It'll be 5 questions. You'll have 5 minutes to complete it. And those questions are randomly assigned. You'll have that graded for correctness, of course. The other thing that you'll see on this whiteboard, as you see here, is the upcoming schedule. Again, one of the things that I do like about our Canvas is under the syllabus, and we'll go over this for those of you who haven't noticed it before, you have your entire schedule of what's going to be happening and when things are going to be due. There's no reason to ever have to email me and ask me, hey, when is Unit 5 due? Because you have all that information. But I also like to have our schedule up here to remind you of all the things we have going on. So as you can see today, we're going to do our introduction to the class. Some of you haven't. Hopefully at this point, most of you have taken an online class before. But I appreciate there's a tremendous amount of disparity between the competence of instructors, just as there is competence in students with the online format. So not all of you have necessarily used all the resources. And especially if you haven't taken a biology class, there's some extra resources that I want to show you. We'll do that. And then we'll dive into the lecture material, starting first with our anatomical terminology. And then we'll kind of from there slide right into labs where we'll talk about organs and organ systems. The other thing you'll see on the schedule is everything that is coming up. So for instance, on Tuesday, there are 3 things that are due. I know that you are all sitting comfortably at home in your houses or hiding at work or wherever it is that you're doing these things. But even though we will not be meeting, even though we're not on campus, in their ultimate wisdom, the university has decided you still have to fill out lab safety forms. So those are due by Tuesday. If you do not fill out one of those forms and sign it, then with your signature, either in pen or digitally, you cannot take the class. So those are their rules, not mine, but that is something that has to be done. Again, for those of you who have not taken a lot of online classes or not used Proctorio, there's a Proctorio and Syllabus quiz. That is graded for content, so it is important to read the proctorial rules. It is important to read the syllabus before you take that, and that will give you a chance to experience the proctorial environment for a test, scanning your area, the way it takes the test, recording it, and making sure all those things are compatible. This is just a simple 10-point exercise. Again, the point of this is to make sure that you know how to use the system properly so that you're not using it for the very first time in 2 weeks when we're taking the first exam, and that the exam's worth 100 points and you don't scan your room properly and I have to give you a 0 because you didn't do it properly. So it is important to make sure you understand the rules and follow them correctly, and that proctorial quiz will help you with that. A chance to practice your proctorial skills will be a 10-point chemistry quiz. That quiz will open today after class, and it is due at the beginning of class on Tuesday, so you must have it completed by 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Chemistry is a prerequisite to get into this class. So we have a ton of material to cover. So I don't have time to remind you what the difference between an acid and a base is, or what the difference between an ionic bond and a covalent bond is, or any of those types of things. So this chemistry quiz is 20 questions. I will warn you, these are not my questions. Basically, I went to a chemistry instructor on campus and said, give me 20 questions that a student who successfully completes your class should have. And so I use that for the quiz for this. And again, 20 questions, but it's only worth 10 points. It's just a chance to encourage you to retain some of the information from chemistry. And if you didn't, then what I would recommend is the second chapter in our textbook, up to macromolecules. We're going to talk about the macromolecules. That's the fun stuff. That's the important stuff. Everything up to there you should read, and that will probably cover most of it. Obviously, you know, the first half of the chapter isn't going to cover a whole semester worth of stuff, but it would be definitely a good starting point. Also, thank you. Many of you have taken advantage of the opportunity to meet one-on-one with me by a Zoom appointment. You meet with me for 5 minutes, you can get 5 points of extra credit. The last day to do that will be Tuesday as well. So after class today and after class Tuesday, I have some more appointments set up. And for those of you who haven't found it yet, I will show you where that is shortly. Then you get a whole 1 day off. We come back on Thursday the 10th, and your lab manual unit review is due. The lab manual, one of the reasons you guys have 2 textbook bundles is because the lab manual for the MERIB, which is a textbook, stinks, quite frankly. And it is a lot of repetitive pictures, a lot of repetitive wording from the textbook. But what I love about our Ammerman lab manual is it is a workbook. And part of that workbook is it has 3 components to it. It has a pre-lab, which is you won't be turning in for assignments. In fact, I don't think, let me look at my schedule here. Yeah, you actually won't be turning any of the pre-labs in for an assignment. However, those pre-labs will take you about a half an hour. It's vocabulary, it's labeling. If you actually take the time to do those pre-labs, I think that would be a great study tool to help you for the exams. Then there are all the activities, some of which we'll be doing, most of which we won't because we aren't on campus. But the last part of each unit is a review. And that review has 2 components to it. The first is a check your recall, where basically it's just asking you to regurgitate information, labeling things, identifying things along those lines. And then the second part, the check your understanding, is more critical reasoning type of questions. Based on what you know, how would you evaluate this situation? I think they're excellent questions, and many of them are in the test banks of your exams, so it is worthwhile to take the time to do that. That lab manual review, both parts are on pages 29 through 36. I see these lab assignments as homework, and homework is supposed to be about learning. So for your homework, for most of your homework assignments, I will be grading them for completeness. What that means is that I'm looking for time and effort. As long as you are putting time and effort into it, I will not penalize you if you get something wrong. If you write this amazingly eloquent paragraph describing what you think the rationale for the question is, and it is 100% wrong, I'm not going to ding you for that because you've shown me you've put time and effort. However, if it says A and B and explain, and you just type A, or even worse, you leave it blank, then that's not showing me time and effort, and you will lose points on that exercise. So there will be some that are graded for correctness. Wrong answers will lose you points, but most of the homeworks, especially all the unit reviews, are going to be graded for completeness. So it's free points for studying. Put time and effort into this and it will help you to be successful and you get the free points. Along those same lines, because we're not going to be in the classroom, we have a lot of lab simulators. Our first one is due on Thursday the 10th, and that is our homeostasis labster. For these labster lab simulators and the PhysioXs that we'll be doing as well, you need to complete them 100%. And also you have to get at least 80% correct to get full credit. So two things I'll warn you about this is that as you're going through them, one of the things I love about the Labster is it integrates seamlessly with Canvas. So once you complete it, it automatically puts your grade into the grade book. Now, as I mentioned, you will get full credit if you get it 80% correct, but if you get 90% on it, then what'll happen is it'll give you 90% of the score. These are worth 20 points. So you'll see when you finish it and get it 90% correct, you'll only get 18 points. I have to go back in manually after the fact to change that and bump it up to full credit. So when you first complete it, if you don't get it 100% correct, your score won't be 100%. But as long as you get it 80% correct, I will be bumping that up to full credit. Now, if you don't get 80% correct, then the good news is you can complete it as many times as it takes to get it to 80% or above. So if it takes you 14 times, well, first, I'm sorry, but B, you will get full credit for that when you get there. Lastly, your student info sheets are due on Thursday. Friday, your lab manual unit 3 is due. Unit 3 is on microscopes. You will not be handling or carrying or feeding for microscopes on this, but you do need to understand how microscopes work. This is all testable material. You need to know the components. You need to know how to use a microscope, and we're going to do a ton of histology in this class. We're going to look at a massive amount of microscope slides. All right, so we'll be doing that. There is one wonky thing in your lab manual, I guess because it's microscopes. I don't know if they didn't feel it wasn't real material or anything along those lines. As I mentioned before, the organization of all the units is pre-lab, exercises, and then the lab review. But in unit 3 for the microscopes, they didn't do that. Basically, the review questions are at the top of the page and the exercises are underneath it. So as you'll see, when you look at this, and again, it'll make sense when you look at this, pages 62 through 68, there are 10 review questions at the top. Those are what you are responsible for doing. You should read the activities underneath so that you understand how to use the microscopes, but obviously you don't have a microscope, so you're not going to be able to do most of those activities. So it's just the review questions that I'm grading for that. Your second labster is going to be due. That one's going to be on mitosis. And because we'll be practically 1 week from our first exam, we're going to do a practice lab exam to see how well you've been studying this first week, to see whether you're on pace, doing well, understand what is expected of you. And the good news about doing this on this Friday is that if you are not as successful on that practice lab exam, then you can see that you are not studying this material the correct way. And you still have time to modify your learning habits before you get there. All right, questions on that? So again, when you come on, you'll always have the schedule here. You'll always know what to expect. There's a quiz. You'll see that information as well. And I'll remind you again please take that attendance quiz. If you haven't taken that attendance quiz with the access code FIRE, you will not be able to add the class. Which brings me to my next important point. As of right now, 15 minutes into the class, we only have 27 students. So if you are here and trying to add, if it stays this way, good news, you are likely going to get in. During the first break, we will see who's here and who's not here. I don't know, usually, traffic and parking, those aren't the usual issues that we have, so that shouldn't be a problem for this. But we'll see if any stragglers have some computer problems and have some difficulty getting in. But after we finish the introduction, I will take an official count. And like I said, if it stays like this, anybody here who's trying to add will be able to do so. So we'll see what's happening from there. All right, any questions? If you've noticed, I talk fast and I haven't had my coffee yet. I typically have my coffee during the first break. So when I come back, I switch it up even a higher gear. All right.
I have a question.
Excellent.
What's the access code for the syllabus quiz that's due tomorrow?
Well, first of all, the attendance quiz is not due tomorrow. It's due today. You have to complete it today. That attendance quiz is your way of showing me that you have taken the exam. I mean, that you are here, and that way you can maintain your priority in the class.
Right. I took that one, so I think I'm just talking about for tomorrow.
Well, we haven't gotten to tomorrow yet, so you have to wait till tomorrow to show me that you're here tomorrow.
Got you. Okay.
So it's the same way. You will log on tomorrow. You will see that there's a new access code, and I will give you that access code tomorrow, and that shows me that you're there then.
Got you.
Great. Excellent. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it the completed before 5 minutes into the class, or what's the time limit exactly?
So, okay. For the attendance quiz, which we're having today, which we're having tomorrow, those attendance quizzes are merely, like I said, this is the housekeeping stuff that we have to do so I can see who's here, who's not here, so that I can add the students that need to add. Technically, I've got this attendance quiz open till 10 because someone may be having computer problems or haven't figured out, or maybe they're sitting in my Zoom office right now because they don't realize that which is a good point. I should actually go on there and make sure nobody's on there. So they may be having some kind of difficulty in getting here. So I want to give them that leniency. But these are just the attendance quizzes. When we get to the daily quizzes are going to be on content. Either the stuff we covered the previous day, and if it's stuff we covered the previous day, it'll be more specific information, or it could be on the stuff we're planning on covering that day, in which case the information will be a little bit more general. But those will be the kind of questions. For those daily quizzes, it'll be 5 multiple choice questions. You'll have 5 minutes to complete them. And those are due, so what'll happen is you'll have 10 minutes at the beginning of class to complete those. So it's only 5 minutes. I'll open it 15 minutes early, but those are due by 8:10. So if you show up at 8:11, or if you show up at 8:07, right, you're only gonna have 3 minutes to complete it. If you show up at 8:10, you'll have missed it and you won't get those points. So again, the point of the daily quiz is like I said, I either have them at the very beginning of class or at the very end of class to encourage people to be on time and to stay through the entire lecture. Okay?
Okay.
Excellent. Any other questions?
Yeah, I also have one question.
Yes.
My question is the lab manual, the one from the A&P application manual from the e-textbook bundle?
So there are 2 bundles for this class, and I appreciate this is where some of the confusion comes in. As of right now, this will change in the fall, but as of right now, every instructor uses the same textbook. That's the Merib textbook, right? So all of us use the same textbook. However, different instructors use different lab manuals. Some instructors use the Merib lab manual, but as I said, I find it uses the exact same images as the textbook, a lot of the same verbiage as the textbook, and so I find it very redundant and pointless. So that's why for my class, there is a second bundle. That second bundle has the lab manual. This lab manual, the Ammerman lab manual, Exploring Anatomy and Physiology in the Laboratory, is much more like a workbook. It is much more interactive. And so those are the 2 of the 3 main requirements you have for this class. So it is a different one. You have to have the lab manual. You have to have a textbook. I don't really care what textbook you have. This is the one that we use, but you can use any textbook that you want for this class. But the third thing you need is access to the Mastering A&P. And we'll talk about that more when we work our way through the website. All right. So did that answer your question, Dang?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions? Again, the 2 points that I will make to you is, as I mentioned, I talk fast. One easy way to slow me down, give your hand a chance to rest, is to ask questions. So by asking questions, gives you the opportunity to stop writing for a minute. So again, take that bullet, ask that question. I know people are sometimes intimidated by that, but I am a firm believer that the only stupid question is the question not asked. Oh, looks like someone's in chat. Hold on, just saw that.
That was just me.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Yes. Oh, so no, yes, the eText bundle. So it is a separate bundle, two different bundles, because unfortunately there's two different publishers, different publisher for a lab manual than for a textbook. So the only stupid question is the question not asked. All right, I firmly believe that. I believe that if you have a question, I guarantee someone else in the class has that exact same question. So be the one who's bold enough to raise your hand and ask that question. I mean, if you're truly terrified to ask a question, then you can Venmo $1 to Erica and she'll ask the question for you. All right. So, but again, just be that one who is willing to ask that question. Remember, you're paying a lot of material between the resources and the textbook. You're putting a tremendous amount of time. It doesn't do you any good if you're not understanding the material. Your point is to be here to learn. And if you're not learning, if you're confused, then that is defeating the purpose. My goal here is to help you to be successful. And I can't do that if you don't let me help you. So if something isn't making sense, please be bold enough to ask that question and make sure that that makes sense to you. All righty. So that is the game plan. That is what it'll look like at the beginning of class when we come in. I'll spend the first couple minutes talking about this, and then we will go to and dive into the lecture. Now, before we get into the lecture today, I did want to talk a little bit about our website. We've already mentioned this a couple of times, but here is our Canvas site. Again, my office hours are going to be right after class, super easy that way. So you just can click this link from the front page. Again, the announcements are here as well, so you can see those if you've missed them. But again, have them set up to be forwarded to you. Obviously, you've all figured out confirm Zoom, so you know how to get to the lecture. But one of the things I do want to point out for those of you who have not done the 5 for 5 yet, because this is the one part I think that is a teeny bit tricky. Here on the confirm Zoom, you go to the appointment booking. And then once you're in the appointment booking, notice there's nothing here. That's because you actually have to say who you want to book the appointment with. Even though you are in my Canvas site, you can actually book appointments with any of your online instructors from this confirm Zoom. So you have to actually click on mine. And as you can see, several of the ones from today have already been taken, but there are numerous more today and also tomorrow. So if you want that 5 points of extra credit for coming in, spending 5 minutes talking to me, show me your dog, talk about your children, whatever it is, you can do that, ask questions, and you can have that set up there. As I mentioned, our syllabus is here. With our student learning outcomes, if you ever have problems sleeping at night, feel free to come here and read those, and that'll put you right out. So you have that as well. Remember, this is a 2-semester class with 430 and 431. The material that we're covering in this one isn't just randomly selected out of a hat. It not only is it to help you to be successful in here, but we're going to be using all of this material for 431 as well. As was mentioned, there are 2 bundles. Technically, there are, let's do it this way. Lost that. There are actually 2 textbook bundles. One textbook bundle actually has a physical copy of the textbook, and the other just has access to the e-textbook. However, there is a third way that you can get this resource. As I mentioned, with your modified mastering A&P, all of us, and we'll look at this in just a second, everyone in the class has a free 2-week access to this. And in that, you can purchase access to the Mastering A&P that includes an electronic version of the textbook. So if you just want the electronic version of textbook and the access to Mastering Modified A&P, which are the 2 things you have to have, you can do that through the site on Canvas, and I think it's like 116. I think it may have gone up, but I think it's close to that. It's like 116. The advantage of the textbook bundle is that it comes with a photographic atlas. This photographic atlas is going to be vitally important when we get to, for instance, the bones. As you're learning about the bones, you need to know bones and bone figures. So having nice, big, huge pictures. When we get to the muscles, having nice pictures of the muscles that are labeled are going to be vitally important for your success. So the nice thing about the textbook bundle is it comes with that. If you decide to buy the electronic version, then if you have electronic atlases or there's other resources online you're welcome to use, that's fine, but I strongly encourage you to have something. It's the same thing with the lab bundle. You have to have the lab manual, 3rd edition. Again, I don't care how you do that. You can purchase it through the bundle, which comes with a Histology Atlas. You can go to the almighty Amazon and purchase a copy of just the lab manual that way, or you can go to places like Chegg, where you can actually, or Vital Source, where you can rent it, an electronic version. Now, if you're going to rent an electronic version, the one thing I warn you is make sure you purchase it with printing access. You are going to need to be printing these pages or downloading these pages and filling them out. So you don't want the view-only version of that. If you do that, you're not going to be able to do the assignments. And there are a lot of assignments that are going to be due. Now, again, the nice thing about the bundle is it comes with a Histology Atlas. As I mentioned, we are going to be, even though we don't have microscopes, we're going to look at a ton of microscope slides. Now, again, we have the almighty Google. When we're looking at ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissues, you can type ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissues into a web search, and you're going to get a million pictures of ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissues. However, we're also talking about Google, right? I'm sure, like me, most of you get up in the morning, and the first thing you do is jump on the computer and you type in a search like BTS shirtless, right? And while a million pictures will come up when you do that, are all of them going to be pictures of Jimin with his shirt off? No. And if you don't happen to know who Jimin is, well, A, first, shame on you. But secondly, you're not going to be able to tell which ones are him and which ones are just some random dude with his shirt off. All right? The advantage of having a histology atlas is you are going to have beautiful pictures, nice examples of what the things are, where you can learn them. Once you learn what a ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissue is, then when you do your Google search for a ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissue, you'll be able to tell which ones actually are ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelial tissues and which ones aren't. So having some type of histology atlas is going to be important. All right. You will be drawing histology slides. You are going to be responsible for them on the exam. Even though we don't have microscopes, again, that's the problem with this class. This is a hands-on class. This is a physical class, and we're being stuck doing this online. But you're still responsible for the information the same way. So you're still going to be responsible for all that stuff we would do online. All right. Lastly, obviously, everybody here has got hopefully a webcam and a microphone, because those are going to be needed for the exams. I prefer you to be on camera during lectures. I definitely require you to be interactive. I will ask questions. I expect you to answer them. I expect you to ask me questions, right? And I will do my best to answer them. The whole point of this system is for us of being here at 8 o'clock in the morning is for this to be synchronous. There would be nothing easier in the world for me to do to have recorded my lectures 2 months ago, right? Put them up on YouTube and let you guys power through them on your own while I spend the summer in Cabo, right? But that's not what this is about. I am here to help you to be successful. And the way we do that is by you being active and interactive in the learning experience. So I expect you to ask questions. I definitely expect you to answer mine. I expect you to be here. I expect you to be active in the learning process. I will give you everything I have to be successful, but you've got to be an active participant in that process. All right. As I mentioned, oops, keep forgetting I'm drawing on the screen and not actually on the syllabus. This is going to be the method of our online instruction. I expect it to be interactive. There's going to be the daily quiz. We talked about all of that. Here is your grading course. It's pretty simple and straightforward, our course evaluation. This class is about points, right? Anybody in here, by a quick show of hands or give a thumbs up on your screen, how many people here have played golf before? All right, there's one hand. All right, how many people here have heard of golf before? Okay, excellent. A couple more that way. Spectacular. Excellent. If you're standing there on the tee and you hit a 350-yard drive, how many strokes does that count for in golf?
1.
There you go. Excellent. These are the easy questions, folks. Excellent. If you hit a 2-inch putt How many strokes does that count for?
1.
1, right? In golf, strokes are strokes are strokes. In this class, points are points are points. 1 point on a homework counts the same as 1 point on an exam, counts the same as 1 point on a Physio X, counts the same as 1 point on a unit review. This class is about maximizing your points. And this class, with us being online, will be somewhere between 1,300 and probably 1,400 points. It will be our total by the end of the semester. Oh, actually, no, that's not true. This is because we're in the summer. This is going to be closer to 1,100 to 1,200 because we're in summer. Only 4 exams, 4 lab exams. So yeah, your job is to maximize your points. If you want an A in this class, you need 90% of your points. All right, so that's going to be your job. Your job is to maximize those points. There's no learning curve in this one. All right, taking this in the summer is brutal. Not only do we have an exam every 2 weeks, but every exam counts. We have a comprehensive final exam. So those of you who like to cram the information, regurgitate it on the page, and then you just dump it and move on, that's not going to cut it in this class. We need to know this information to move on to 431. So you actually have to retain this information. Now, I will do some things to help you with this. I will curve all the exams. Now, I don't mean a traditional bell curve in that we have the same number of A's and the same number of F's and the same number of B's and the same number of D's. But based on what the top score in the class is, I will curve the grades based on that so that everybody improves from that, right? We can do the simple thing like this if we obviously are talking about a lab exam. And let's say the lab exam is out of 70 points and someone gets a 56 out of 70 on that first lab exam. Those are the points and those are what I care about. But I know students care about percentages. So what would your percentage be if you got a 56 out of 70 on that first lab exam?
80%.
Really? Oh, hey, I didn't do that on purpose. That's excellent. All right, perfect. 80%. Spectacular, right? And there's a range of scores, and maybe the top score in the class is 65. If the top score in the class is 65, what I do when I curve it is I typically curve it to that top score. So now their score is 65 out of 65. And of course, what does that student get for their grade?
100%.
They get 100%. And of course, you're cursing them, but you got to remember yours get curved as well. So now you're a 56 out of 65. And what's your percentage for that now?
90.
Is it a 90?
Oh.
I don't think I was that clever. Come on, y'all have smart devices in your pocket or sitting next to you. What's 56 divided by 65 times 100?
86%.
86, there you go. Right, so notice everybody benefits from the curve. Yes, there's going to be someone in the class likely who's going to get 100 or somewhere around there, but everybody benefits from the curve. As I mentioned, I grade the homework assignments for correctness. For completeness, not correctness. So as long as you're putting time and effort, you're going to get full credit. Free points for studying is what that's going to be. Right? You have these opportunities to help you to be successful. There's could be a participation grade. As long as you're here and active, you won't lose points. That participation grade is a grade. It's not extra credit, but that can help. There's all these things that I will do to try to help you to be successful in this class. But if at the end of the semester, you have an 89.7% in the class, what's your grade going to be in this class?
B.
B.
It's going to be a B. All right. If you want an A, you got to get 90% of the points. Now, the good news here is everybody's capable of doing that. And because it's all about maximizing your points, no one's grade affects anybody else's. If every single person in this class gets 90% or more of the points, then every single person in this class gets an A. So again, one of the things I love about this format is it's not competitive. Work together, help yourselves, be successful, and everybody can get the grade that they want in this class. But it's going to be hard. The speed is incredibly fast. Every test counts. During the regular fall or spring, we have more time. I have 5 exams. With 5 exams, your comprehensive lecture exam can replace your lowest lecture score. With only 4, I can't do that. So every exam matters. There is no time for a learning curve in this class. We are fast paced. It is brutal, right? Again, you got my warning email. I promised my wife I wouldn't call you guys stupid, but I do think that it is a mistake to take this class during the summer. This is a class that you need this information. And so rushing through it doesn't help. There's a very linear correlation between the amount of time you have to study and how successful you will be in this class. And the one problem with summer is you're getting the information twice as fast and you have half the time to study it. It is not a good combination. All right, that is that. The lab and lecture exams will be on the same day. The formats are different for them, but again, all the material cover is all related. So you're responsible for all the information on all of the exams. We talked about the daily quizzes already. Doom and gloom stuff. Class policies. Again, because of the speed of the course during the summer, the general rule for the class, and again, this is the general rule, is that there are no makeup exams or quizzes. Now, the daily quizzes, as I said, you miss it, those are missed points, but those are only worth 5 points. The lab and lecture exams on those days are a big deal, obviously, if you miss that and get a 0. Because of the pace, because of the timing, because of the short amount of time and the no open time we have in this, it's very, very hard to schedule makeup exams. Not impossible, but very, very hard. And since it's not 100% possible, the general rule in the class is that there are no makeup exams. However, I will try to make an exception for you. If, when you looked at the schedule, as one person has already done this summer, and seen that there is a conflict with their with the time of this class, let me know for when the exam is, and we will try to make those accommodations. I can't guarantee it, but I will do my best to make those accommodations. Obviously, the sooner you let me know, the better. Now, again, right, if you look at the schedule and you see grandma's getting married in Vegas at the same time as the 3rd exam, you can let me know that ahead of time. I know things like car accidents are hard to schedule in advance. And I know if you're being rushed to the emergency room, I shouldn't be the first person you call. But the more time you give me with these types of things, the easier it'll be to try to make those accommodations. So let's try to do something with that. Again, hopefully it won't be an issue because it's tough during the summer. Speaking of accommodations, there is a great service on campus, the Disability Students Programs and Services. If you require any kind of accommodations, additional time, other resources, those can be provided for you. A couple semesters ago, I had a deaf student, so we were able to have a translator on Zoom to be able to help us with that, which was awesome. So again, if you have those, make sure you contact them and then contact me so we can make those arrangements. And again, don't do it 11:30 tonight before our first exam, because that doesn't give me any time to make those arrangements, but more time, better, always. Academic honesty, American River College values academic honesty. Current policy prohibits dishonesty such as cheating, plagiarism, or knowingly furnishing false information to the college. There's all the obvious things for this during the exam. Don't have a paper with notes sitting right next to you. Don't have your cell phone out. You can't have a smartwatch on during the exam, so take all of those things off. You'll have to get your working minutes for something else. But those are all the obvious things that hopefully you know and understand. Make sure you scan your room carefully with your camera when you are taking the exam. I've posted 3 examples of students in the past that I got permission from to post theirs to see how you can show me. You got to show me your workspace, show me the space behind your computer so I don't see you don't have these big, huge, like those science fair post boards up with all the information on it. So again, the more transparent you are in the testing process, the more leniency I can have when you're staring off into space and thinking and looking down and scratching your head and doing all those things that we normally do on an exam and don't think about, but because now we're on camera, we have to worry about. So the more you are transparent in the process, the better that is going to be. But again, I think that's the obvious stuff. What I think is a little less obvious is that I want and encourage you to work together on your assignments. homework assignments. When we get to the bones, there's going to be a 30-point review you're going to be working on. And I encourage you to work in your groups, because you will have groups, or outside your groups, form your own study groups to work with. And that is awesome. Come up with the correct answers. However, after you've come up with the correct answer with your group, then I want you to write the answer in your own words. If you turn in 2 homework assignments where you've just photocopied it and put 2 different names on those 2 copies, right? That is another example of cheating, right? The way you show me you understand this information is by putting it in your own words, right? Make one bunny ear, make a second bunny ear. The first bunny ear goes around the second bunny ear through the bunny hole, right? By being able to describe that process in my own words, I understand how to tie a shoe, right? And I can show you that I understand that as well. When you take the exams, you're going to need to write those answers in your own words. You're not just going to memorize whatever Wikipedia said. So make sure you are putting the information in your own words, and but on all of the assignments. So work together. I encourage you that, but make sure that you're putting it in your own words. And of course, there's a link there if you have any questions about your responsibilities that way. Last doom and gloom thing, dropping the class. Obviously, everybody here is here. Awesome. And everybody who's not here is not hearing this. So the people who aren't here and don't show up within the next hour or so are going to be dropped from the class to make room for everybody. As I mentioned, we're still at 27. So for those of you trying to add, very, very good news. However, the same thing is true tomorrow. You must be here tomorrow on time. There will be an attendance quiz again tomorrow as well for you to take. And when you take that, you will, again, assure that you maintain your spot in that class. I'm hoping, and again, if we stay at 27, I assume we'll be done with enrollment issues tomorrow. After that, this is college and you are adults, so you are responsible for your schedule. One of the important things that you should remember is at any Los Rios school, not just American River College, you can only take a class like this 3 times. You can only have 3 attempts at it, right? And if you come to the first week, decide you don't like my teaching style, disappear, and never show up again, then what's going to happen is you're going to end the semester with an F at the end, and that's going to count as one of your 3 opportunities. This is college, you're adults, you're responsible for your schedule. If you decide that getting up at 8 o'clock in the morning or my teaching style or taking this class this summer doesn't work for you, then you are responsible for dropping the class. If you drop it by the 11th, which is Friday, then you get a full refund. It doesn't count as one of your 3 attempts. You don't get a W. There's no notation on your transcript or anything. If you stay past the 11th, then this counts as a class taken. It counts as one of your 3 attempts. You will get a grade or something like that. Although you do have till July 16th, which is right after our 3rd exam. So we only have 4 exams. So you can wait till after the 3rd exam before you finally drop. And you'll get a W for that as well. All right, so know those dates. That is important. Make sure you're here today. Make sure you're here tomorrow. And if you are one of those people who thought you could just watch this on YouTube and not show up in the morning and not take the attendance quiz, haha, you've been dropped. All right, excellent. All right, so that's the doom and gloom stuff. Fun things. Don't miss class. Don't skip any work. Aside from the fact that we have daily quizzes that are points that are going to add up, as I said, I expect this to be interactive. I expect you to be active in the learning process, so you are expected to be here. And there is a participation grade. So if you're constantly not showing up, not only are you going to lose out on the daily quizzes, not only are you going to lose out on that, but you will lose. We're going to be doing group activities, other things along those lines, and so it will hamper your grade. Be active in the learning process. Oh, go ahead. Yes.
So I looked at the PDF printout for the syllabus, and that one has June 12th and July 17th for the drop dates. I just want to know.
You know what? That's because I used the template of the previous semester when I made that, and I forgot to change those dates. These are the accurate dates.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was last year, so I apologize. Yes, I'll have to make a note to fix that. Yeah, I basically have the same template for these because, again, it doesn't really change from my pen from semester to semester. And I originally didn't make a PDF because I was trying to move away from it, but I have to turn one into the office, so I figured I'd make it available for you guys. Thank you for letting me know that. And thanks for catching that. Excellent. Awesome. I like that. All right. Be active in the learning process. I have to get up early and be here. You have to get up early and be here. So like I said, ask the questions, make sure you're getting your money's worth out of this class. So most of these are things I already said. Complete your lab exercises, even if you're not turning them in. Like I said, those pre-labs in your lab manual, I think are awesome. You're not going to be assigned any of them. You're not going to turn any of them in for points, but if you actually take the time to do them, they're going to be a great resource to help you for studying. Put time and effort into your homework. And again, I want that feedback from you. Assignments are due. Oh, that's what we didn't talk about. Let's talk about those assignments. Assignments are due at the beginning of class. And I do mean the beginning of class. I do mean, no, not by email. Oh, wait, okay, hold on. Oh, sorry. I didn't even bother. I saw mail. We'll talk about that in a second. Great question, though. It is an excellent question. We'll get to that in a second. I forgot about talk about the assignment, so I wanted to talk about that real quickly. But due at the beginning of class. So that means 8 o'clock. Don't wait till 7:55 right before class begins to try to upload it into Canvas. Because if you wait till then and you have some kind of problems or there's some kind of delays and it comes at 8:05, then technically that's late. Now, the good news is you can turn in late assignments. But they're only accepted up to 1 week. And whether they're 5 minutes late or 5 days late, they're only worth half credit. So if you wait till the very last minute to turn in that unit review, and it ends up being 5 minutes late because you had some kind of connection problem, then your free 10 points just became free 5 points out of 10. And that does start to add up. So it is important to complete these things and get them done on time. Now, I appreciate that there is still some issues with the lab manuals being received on time. So I will say for this first week, I will give some flexibility on those assignments. So the Unit 1 review, the Unit 3 review, if you don't have your book yet, you can turn those in late and I will not penalize you as long as you get them in by next week and get that stuff. If someone wants to post the PDFs for those on the discussion board and to allow people to do that, that will be fine as well. The lab manual is the issue for that one. The textbook, if you haven't gotten your textbook manual yet, that is okay because as I mentioned, everybody gets free 2-week access to the modified master in A&P, including the e-text for that. So if you don't have your textbook bundle yet, you've got 2 weeks to be able to get that hammered out. That's not a problem. The lab manual, though, I understand can be an issue, so I will be flexible that way. All right. As I mentioned, your biggest challenge in this summer is that summer is horrible. You're getting the information twice as fast and you have half the time to study it. So being disciplined, being persistent in your studying for this class is going to be vitally important, right? The university has a formula that they use where for every hour of lecture that you have in class, they say you should study 3 hours at home. And for every hour of lab, you should study 1 hour at home. Well, if you think about this, well, I'm just showing you where this is. You should be able to go to, so again, where we're at for this is on our syllabus. So this is, I'm just showing you this information here on this. You don't have to, you shouldn't be sitting here reading this now. You should have been reading this for the past week that the site has been open, but you can also read it after class as well. So again, I'm just showing you where these things are and I'm using it as an outline to remind me of what I want to talk about. So let's go back to this formula from your class, from your university, from the school. Excellent. Just out of curiosity, how much is it on VitalSource? I know on Chegg it was like 40 or 50 or something like that. What's it on VitalSource?
I think it was like 46 for through August 1st.
Excellent. And that's with the print access?
Yep.
Now, unlimited printing or just a small amount? Do you know how
It
much?
seems like it's unlimited. The only thing is it has a watermark on the back of it, so it's not like it can really be, like it shouldn't really be shared. It
Yeah, well,
seems.
then that's fine, but I don't care that it has the watermark on it. That's awesome. Excellent. Okay, that's good to know. That's a decent price. Now, the only other thing I would remind you, remember, if you said that's only through August, right? So that helps you for summer school. But remember, if you take 431 with me, you'll need to rent it again for that as well. So make sure you add that into your price, that you're having to rent these things twice when you're doing those things. All right. So we have 4.5 hours in class each day. Of that, again, because we're online, probably about 3 of that is going to be lecture, and about 1.5 hours of that a day is going to be lab. So for a single day in this classroom, you should be studying 9 hours for the lecture. You should be studying 1.5 hours for the lab. So that's 10.5 hours per day that you should be studying. Oh, and yeah, this is summer school. So we meet 4 times a week. That is 42 hours of studying. That is what the university recommends, right? And I will tell you that during a normal semester, most A and B students do more than that. So not only are you here for all that time, but you've got a full-time job studying for this as well, right? It is an unreasonable task to ask of you. And yet this is what you are setting up for yourself. So you have to be disciplined. You have to have good study habits. Waiting till the Sunday night before an exam to study for it is going to destroy you. One of the problems I think people have, biology in general, but especially a class like A&P, one of the things that I love about this class is 2 things. First, it's hard. And because it's hard, I don't have to be tricky. I can be very straightforward. I can tell you X, Y, and Z is going to be on the exam because I know you're going to have to spend hours studying X, Y, and Z. But the big difference is how you study for a class like this. If you take a class like psychology or a class like chemistry or something like that, there's usually 2 or 3 big concepts. And so the day before the exam, you can sit down and you can hammer out those 2 or 3 big concepts and get the understanding of it and be successful, by sitting there for 12 hours and studying that and being ready for the exam. This class doesn't have 3 or 4 big concepts. This class has 100 little concepts. The nice thing about that is each one of those concepts is super easy, right? You could sit in a chemistry class or a physics class and look at some physics proof or some chemistry equation for an hour and not be any closer to knowing it and to understanding it. But if I give you a femur and give you an hour to play with it, look at it, taste it, you're going to master that femur by the end of that hour. The femur by itself isn't what's hard. The fact is that it's only one of 206 named bones, and you only have 2 weeks to learn them. So the problem is you have 100 little things. And if you have 100 little things, that's not something you can sit down for 10 straight hours and learn 100 little things. By the time you get to hour 4, you have forgotten everything from hour 1. This is not a class that you can cram for. You have to be diligent. You have to eat it 1 piece at a time, right? How do you eat an elephant? 1 bite at a time. How do you succeed at anatomy and physiology? 1 concept at a time. You have to be diligent. You have to take your time. You have to be disciplined in how you study. And you have to be active. One of the things to be active is to take advantage of me. Come to my office hours. Email me. Lots of you have been emailing me. I think that's awesome. Thank you for that. Yes, the lab manual is at the bookstore. It can be purchased in the bundle. I think they're still only doing online purchases through Follett. I don't know if the bookstore is actually open on campus yet. I don't know. They're slowly opening up, but I don't think they're opening up for the summer. But you can do it through Follett and then go drive and do the pickup. So it should be in a bundle with the Histology Atlas there as well. All right. Lastly, be courteous to your fellow students. I want you to be on camera. I want you to be on microphone so that you can be active in the learning process. But if you happen to be at work while you're while things are going on, and and you work at a fire station like I had last semester, a student who worked at the fire station and had his microphone on all the time, so you'd hear the alarms go off or all the other firemen and stuff making noise. So I will mute you if it becomes too distracting. Again, it's very easy to mute and unmute yourself if you want to stay on mute, just to make sure your kids aren't making a lot of noise or things along those lines. Just be respectful, be mindful. If you have to have your phone on or something like that next to you, that's great. Just make sure it's on silent, right? I've got my smartwatch to tell me if the phone rings or if my kids are, you know, in an accident or something like that. So I have all of that information. Zoom backgrounds are fine as long as they're not disruptive. Again, if you know, we're going to be here for so many hours, and I appreciate that it can get boring, but just all I ask is that you not be disruptive, right? This is early in the morning. It's a long class. If you need to sleep, great. That's fine. Don't snore, right? Don't disrupt the class. As long as you're not disrupting the class and disrupting the learning environment, then that's all that I care about for that. Now, as I mentioned, hopefully these are things that you guys have already looked at. We have the tentative schedule here that I've made. But as I mentioned, one of the things that I love about Canvas, one of the few things I love about Canvas, is this course summary. So while I give you that schedule at the beginning to tell you when things are due and when things are going, you always have this schedule in front of you that shows you when all these things are going on. So as I mentioned on Tuesday, your chemistry quiz is due at the beginning of class, your lab safety form due at the beginning of class, your 5 for 5 meetings. Technically, we got to the end of the day, because remember, I do have appointments on Tuesday as well. So I guess I should probably change that. That proctoral quiz, all of these things. So you have the schedule here for the entire semester, reminding you, showing you where the assignments are and when they're going to be due. Okay? Questions on that?
Nope.
All right. Quizzes is where you will find the attendance quizzes like we have here, the chemistry quizzes. This will be where our lab and lecture exams are, and any daily quizzes that we have will be on these pages as well. Sometimes, like the attendance quiz, they'll be there ahead of time. Others you won't see till the day of. Modules we talked about. Again, the getting started is where you find those correct ways to scan and some of the other information. Where you'll probably be spending most of your time. Oh, that was one other thing that I wanted to mention too. We're doing good on time. Okay. You're under the study tools, where you'll find my YouTube site for where the lectures are, where I'll be posting the lectures. Usually it takes about a day or two to get them posted after I get them recorded. And with this going back to back, that can be an issue. Today's lecture might not be up till Wednesday, and we'll have already done Tuesdays at that time. So it's a good resource to be able to go back to, or if, you know, suddenly there was a problem with your kid falling down the stairs and you had to spend half an hour taking care of them, that gives you the opportunity to go back and check the part that you missed. You have that. These are some great online resources. The Cosumnes River College has a virtual anatomy lab that has some models and materials that are very similar to the ones in the classroom that are both labeled and unlabeled. Some great histology things, and there's this great bone site as well. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you guys about is obviously we're covering a lot of material in a very short period of time. So one of the things that can help you to be successful is we have a instructor assistant by the name of Jeff Chingaris, who has an open lab on Wednesdays when we don't have class from 10:30 in the morning to 8:30 in the evening. He has 2 cameras set up. He has models, he has bones, he has other resources that are normally in the classroom, and he will go over them with you. So if you have a question about the femur, he will go over the femur. If someone else has a question about, you know, the quadriceps femoris muscles, he'll go over that with you. And like I said, he has multiple cameras and all of that. Go, be active, be part of the learning process. When you go, you need to check in with him. So you'll tell him your name, you'll tell him what class you're taking. Make sure you also check out when you leave so that he can keep track of how many hours you are there. We do this for 2 reasons. One, because we have to justify the expense of having him do this. So by showing that students are showing up and taking advantage of it is a huge vital part. But the other important reason why you want to check in and check out is for every hour of open lab that you go to, you will get 1 point of extra credit, up to a total of 15 points. Now, Again, it's cumulative. So if you only go to 30 minutes the first day, and then 45 minutes the next, and then 15 the next, and then so and so and so and so, he adds all the times up. So as long as you hit 15 hours by the end of that, then you'll get 15 points of extra credit. Of course, don't stop after that. Keep going. You just won't get more extra credit for it. It's also not all or nothing. If you're only, because of your work schedule or whatever, only able to make it to 6.5 hours, then you'll get 6.5 points of extra credit. But Jeff is an amazing resource. He just, oh God, a couple years ago now, because of the whole Corona thing, completed his master's, is in the process of looking for full-time teaching positions. But in the meanwhile, we get to use him. He's an amazing resource. Quite frankly, he knows too much information, but he is a powerful resource that can help you to be successful. So yes, you spend an hour of time with him, you'll get 1 point of extra credit, but you'll also get way more knowledge that'll give you way more than 1 point when you're actually taking the exam. So take advantage of that. There's a link in there. This is a link to the page where we have that information. So take advantage of those tools. So you'll spend a lot of time on your study tools. The other place where you'll spend your time is in the individual modules. Here, and again, it's really nice. It's very straightforward. These are the assignments that you will have. This is where you'll click to submit the assignments. One of the awesome things about this is that when you do these assignments, because you're logged into Canvas, when you go ahead to submit the assignment to do this, and it reminds you of what the page numbers and all that is here, you're uploading a file. It already puts it into a folder unique with your name because you've already logged into this. So this is something that is super easy to do. This is where, do not email me your assignments. Make sure you turn them in here and turn them in on time, and the due dates, they're there as well.
Professor?
Yes.
So for that open lab on Wednesday, do we access that through the conference Zoom, or is it a separate?
No, it is a Zoom thing. So notice if you click here on the page,
Okay,
there's the link to his Zoom. And there's
perfect.
his information that he's given me for that. So yeah, so exactly. So yes, so that just takes you to the page for that. Yeah, and I guess I should do that because I guess a couple people have asked that. When we go back to the pages, notice when you click on the pages, it shows us our home page. But notice if you view all pages, that shows us the proctoral protocols, which you should be reading, and then also that open lab information. So those are things that are on the page thing. There are a couple more things I wanted to show you here under the sections. So again, your assignments that you're going to be turning in here. Someone mentioned earlier, this is where the lecture slides are located for the sections. There are some lab handouts. I do not do a study guide for the lecture exams. The outlines are probably the closest thing we have to that, but you are responsible for everything we talk about in this class, all the homework assignments that you do, the lab simulations, everything. Again, I don't randomly pick the things you're doing. I do the things that I think you need to know. And again, one of the things I love about this class is that it is hard, so I can be very straightforward. So if we have a concept like homeostasis, which we talk about in lecture, and you have a homework assignment about, and there's some other handout or something that you do that, then you should be fairly certain that there's going to be an essay question about that on the exam, right? The more time we spend on something, the more important it's going to be. However, when we get to things like epithelial tissues and connective tissues and things along those lines, there is an infinite amount of information you could be responsible for. When we get to the bones, every single bone has dozens of bone features on it, and you're not going to be responsible for every single bone feature that has ever been named. Instead, I will give you a very precise study guide for that material, and that's what you'll see here, the lab handout. So for instance, the epithelial tissues, connective tissues, things along those lines, those are the precise lists of the information that you will be responsible for on those concepts. Same thing for the integumentary system. I know microscopes can be scary, so there's a histology help handout here. No assignment on this, but it is something that can help you to be successful. Because we're not in the lab, we're going to do a lot of lab simulators. Here are your lab simulators. So a bunch of labsters we're going to do, PhysioXs that we're going to do, biointeractives, things along those lines. Two more things that you'll find here on this page. Your answer keys. I want these homework assignments to be learning processes. So on the day you turn in a unit review, the key for that is going to post. I do that for two reasons. One is because I want it to be a learning experience. So while the information is fresh, you can look at what the correct answers are. And the other reason is, as I mentioned, I'm graded for completeness. I'm looking for time and effort. Like I said, as long as you put time and effort, you're going to get the points. What that means is you may have written something that is not correct, but it's not going to be marked wrong, because as long as you put time and effort into it, you're getting the points for it. So it is important to look at the review keys to make sure that what you wrote was correct. So you'll have those for that instant feedback after you submitted them, after they're due, so that you can have that as well. The last thing, as you'll see as we get into this class, I'm a truly amazing artist. The whiteboard of Zoom is apparently my canvas. So often as I take these, we'll take screenshots of these images and I will save them here so that you can see all of my beautiful, beautiful art. All right. Those are the main things for that. That is the module. Whoops, I didn't get that. There we go. And that's where you'll be spending most of your time. Again, your grades are here. The Labster dashboard, once you start doing Labsters, you'll have that. One more quick thing I wanted to show you. As I mentioned, there is discussion boards. Right now, I have a water cooler set up. This is for yours. I do not comment on the water cooler. So I ask 3 things. Use it. Take advantage of if you want to form study groups. If you're vaccinated and want to meet outside at a Starbucks or something like that to study this together, you're welcome to make those arrangements here or set up a Zoom or whatever, however to meet up or just communicate asynchronously about information. Again, it doesn't have to be school related. If you want to talk about how horrible the Giants are playing right now, you're welcome to do that. And how they're basically a minor league team. Feel free to do that while you're discussing those things here, how much better the Cincinnati Reds, for instance, are. You can do all of those things. I ask you to be respectful. And I ask you, if someone's not being respectful, to make sure to let me know. I typically do not monitor the water cooler. So again, I expect you to be grown-ups, to be adults, to be college students. But if someone is being disrespectful, then please let me know and I will block them and remove them from the water cooler in that way. We will have some group projects you'll be working on. And so this will also be where you'll be able to form your groups. And this is where you'll also be able to meet with your groups asynchronously to work on that as well. All right. The last thing that we need to talk about, and we'll actually talk about this after the break, we're gonna go ahead and take our first break, is the MyLab and Mastering. The MyLab and Mastering is the other area where we'll be doing a tremendous amount of work. And it's a great, valuable resource, one of the 3 main resources you must have for this class to be successful. But that's going to take a bit of time to go through. So I think what we'll do is go ahead and take our first break here, and then we'll be able to do 2 things during this break. So let's do this. Let's come back to the whiteboard. All right, first, really important question. Speak up if this is the case. Is there anybody who has not taken the attendance quiz yet? Going once. Okay, if you have not taken it, then take it now, right? If you're if you're too shy to speak up, then take it now. Go to the quizzes, go to the attendance quiz, use the access code FIRE. Answer that question that shows me that you are here in the class right now. Because if you don't, then I'm going to drop you. If you don't, then you are not going to be able to add the class. But what I will tell everybody else, again, based on the number that I have here with 27, if you are on the wait list and you are here, welcome to the class. So if you are here and on the wait list, there are 3 things that I want you to do. First, celebrate or cry, depending on how you think of it. But what I want you to do is send me an email with your student ID. All right, if you send me an email with your student ID, what I will do is I will send the permission to add number. All right. So when you send me that email, I will respond, probably not till after class today, because again, we're not going to have that much time during the breaks to be able to do this. But by that, I will do that so that you can add the class. Remember 2 things. You must add today. Because what happens is my view of the roster basically only updates once a day. So at 6 a.m. tomorrow, I get the updated roster. If your name is not on the roster, tomorrow morning, you will lose priority. You will lose your priority to add, and you will not be able to add the class. So add it today, and so that you're there on the roster tomorrow. The last thing is remember to pay. You have 48 hours or something like that to pay once you add a class. If you forget to pay, you will automatically, not by me, by eServices, you will be automatically dumped by eServices, and you will lose your priority to do that as well. All right. So like I said, I could list the students that are here, but it's basically everyone. Anyone here who's trying to add, welcome to the class. You have gotten in. So make sure you do those things, and then I will add you to the class, and we will be set up that way. All right. Questions on that?
Nope.
All right, excellent. So then here's what's going to happen. Oops, didn't mean to do that one. Go back. There we go. That. Oh, good gravy.
Professor, how long are the breaks typically?
So that's what I was going to do. Right. Typically the breaks are about 10, 15 minutes. I'm going to make this one a little bit longer just because, like I said, I want to see who's actually here and who's not. I have to go through the roster that way. But so what we'll do is we'll take our first break. We will restart the lecture. Well, the introduction, we'll say it that way, because we're not done with our introduction yet. We'll restart the introduction in 15 minutes. So that's going to be 9:27. And because I'm bad about it, I usually remind myself to start the recording again when we come back as well, because I don't want to leave it sitting here for 15 minutes while we just stare at the blank screen. So I'll pause the recording and come back and do that again, start it again when we're done. All right. Any questions before we take our first break?
I have a question.
Yes.
For our break, do we stay on the Zoom meeting or do we just leave and then re-enter?
So what you want to stay on Zoom. I mean, you can leave the Zoom and come back if you want to, if you need something, you need to do something else. Typically what I do is, because I leave the room, the first break is when I go make my coffee. So what I'll typically do is I'll mute my my microphone, I'll turn off my camera, I'll run downstairs so that I can make my coffee, come back up here, right, drink it, have my eyes roll back into my head, and then turn it back on when we're ready to start. All right?
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. All right. Yeah, you can leave and come back, but you can also just pause it. I've had students who just, point their camera down or whatever. Yeah, so it's fine. However you want, just be here ready to be active at 9:27. All right. All right. Excellent. I will see you guys in 15 minutes. Awesome. Thank you for that. Excellent. Excellent. All right. So like I said, we'll work out the kinks of that, figure out what the heck is going on, but let's then move forward. The last thing that we need to do after we do that is to dive into this material. So we've talked about the introduction. You know what you need to do to be successful. So let's start talking a little bit about the class and what is going to be expected of you that way from that. So our goal, as I mentioned, is this is anatomy and physiology. So let's start out easy. I've taught the 102 version of this, which is the super introductory class for this, where they do it all in one semester, very superficial. And one of the first questions that I always ask on their first exam is to define anatomy and physiology. And you'd be astounded at how many people, after sitting there for 4 weeks in an A&P class, can't actually define anatomy and physiology. So let's get that out of the way now. How do you define anatomy? This is the part where you respond both words out loud.
Study of the
body.
structures.
I like that. Okay. Oh, I like that even better. Absolutely. Study of the body, but more specifically, study of the structures of the body. Absolutely. Right. Study of the structures of the body. All right. This is my elbow. This is my nose. This is my ear. Things along those lines. How does that compare to physiology then?
That's the function of the parts of the body.
There you go. Absolutely. So anatomy is the structure, is the study of the structures of the body. Physiology is the study of the functions of the body. And is there a relationship between structures and function? Again, these are the
Yes.
easy questions, folks. Yep, absolutely. Right, absolutely. There is a huge relationship between the structure and the function. The shape of something determines how it works. How it works is going to determine which tissues we're going to make it up with, and so on and so forth. Right? Now, obviously, these are big, huge general terms. There are all sorts of levels and subdivisions to this. Again, here, if we look, I agree. Here we can look at. All right, someone, I'm going to go ahead and mute everybody real quickly. But feel free to unmute unless you are echoing my lecture, because we don't need that. All right, excellent. So as you can see here, there are many, many subdivisions to anatomy. You don't have to necessarily be writing all of these down, but I think many of these make some semblance of sense. Obviously, cytology is the study of skills. Gross anatomy is the study of the things that are really icky. No, that doesn't sound right. What is the study of gross anatomy? What's gross anatomy? Isn't that TV show where McSteamy died? I'm sorry?
Anything you can see with your eyes.
Okay, that's a good example. So it's definitely the bigger components. Absolutely. We want to be careful with that. Obviously, you hopefully can't see your own liver right now, but you could if you pulled it out of your body. So that would be an example of that. What would the opposite of gross anatomy be?
Net.
Say again?
I'm thinking like gross and net, but that's like income, maybe like the bigger picture and the smaller picture.
Right. So what would the smaller picture be? You're absolutely right. Gross anatomy is the big picture. So how would we define the smaller picture? What would the study of the small things be?
Micro.
Yeah, microanatomy. Absolutely. Microanatomy, looking at the microscopic things. What's surface anatomy?
Would that be the things like you could actually see, since you said gross anatomy is like on the inside and then surface anatomy is on like the outside?
True, you've got the right idea. Gross anatomy include things that are inside, although gross anatomy can be outside things as well. The study of the finger, for instance, would be gross anatomy. But you absolutely have the right idea. Surface anatomy is things that can be seen from the surface of the body. It's not just the skin, right? That would be dermatology. But for instance, if back in the good old days, we brought our former governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, in here and we lathered him up and he got all ripped and pumped up and he started flexing for us, would we be able to define specific muscles just by looking at him?
Yes.
Yeah. Or if instead we brought Kate Moss in here, right, we'd be able to count her ribs without actually having to do anything else other than that, right? So surface anatomy are things that can be seen or felt, right? You may not be as yoked as Arnold or as skinny as Kate Moss, but if you were to feel yourself or your neighbor, can you define muscles? Can you feel bones by touching them? So you've got the right idea, things that can be seen or felt from the first surface of the body. Absolutely. Great, great, great. And again, if we can break anatomy down this way, do you think we can do the same thing with physiology? This is where you all say yes enthusiastically.
Yes.
Absolutely.
There you go. Okay, that was almost enthusiastically. I'll accept that. Excellent. We can do the same thing with physiology as well, right? We can look at things from individual systems like the renal or endocrinology, cell physiology, and so on and so forth. All right. Now, the other important thing to remember is that all living things are made up of common elements. And those common elements are organized in a structure we call a hierarchy. What is a hierarchy?
Like a series of levels.
I like that, series of levels, right? Lots of things have hierarchies. Politics. We've spent a lot of time talking about politics over the past few years, right? We have a president, we have a vice president. I think we have dukes, earls, I don't know, something like that. Politics is confusing. Let's talk about something way more important, football, right? In football, you have the head coach, and then you have an offensive and defensive coordinator. And then underneath them, you have like a wide receivers or a linebacker coach or things like that. You're absolutely right. There are levels. There are levels of organization. And when studying the body, we need to look at those as well. Let's go back to our whiteboard and figure these out. If we were looking at the levels of hierarchy, what would the lowest, simplest, basic, most level that we could study the human body be?
Atoms.
Okay, I like that. So atoms, right? Atoms, molecules, things along those lines. And that would be the chemical level. So at the chemical level, we are studying atoms, we are studying molecules. Oops, helps if I spell chemical. I am not a good typist. And I'm not a person who easily walks and chews bubble gum at the same time. So trying to talk, trying to type at the same time, I am rarely successful. Most of the time I try to catch my my spelling errors, but I should mention that as well. I try to catch my spelling errors, but I miss sometimes, and you can let me know. Spelling does matter in this class on the exams. I should mention that. I will give you one letter. So if you replace an I with an E or transpose an A and an E or something like that, I will give you that. But if you do misspell something more than that, you will lose partial credit for that. So you get one letter and I get the same thing. I get one letter as well. So I get that same thing. Excellent. So we have those chemicals, we have those atoms, we have those molecules. And when we put those together, that brings us to the next level. And what would the next level of our hierarchy be?
Cellular level.
Cells, absolutely, the cellular level. Now, what's the biggest difference between the cellular level and the chemical level? What do we say about cells that we don't say about things like carbon or water or polysaccharides? There we go. Samuel's got it. They're living. This is the lowest order where we have life. Right? We don't think as water is alive or carbon is alive or proteins are alive, but cells are alive. So this is the lowest level, right? When we think of something being alive, how do we define life? What are some of the characteristics we expect of something that is alive? Give me a characteristic. How do you know that you are alive? What can you do that defines you as being alive?
Growth.
Breathe.
Oh, excellent. Grow, right? Metabolism. Excellent. What else?
Replicate.
Yep, absolutely. Reproduce. Perfect. Give me a couple more. What else can you do? Not a very impressive bunch. That those are the only things you can do. Metabolize, reproduce. I mean, those are some of the important things, fun things. How about responding to your environment? Right? Things along those lines. All right, well, you guys need to work on that, but excellent. So we take chemicals, and again, we can't just take a random bucket of chemicals. It has to be special chemicals put together in a special way. And when we do that, we get that cellular level. And the same thing is true as we move up. You put a bunch of cells together, and what do you get from there?
Tissues.
Tissues, absolutely. So if I have a bucket of cells, do I necessarily have a tissue?
No.
No. So what does it have to be about those cells that make it not just a bucket of cells, but actually turn it into a tissue?
Order.
Okay, what do you mean by order?
Well, different tissues have different responsibilities and different tasks.
Okay, so do they have to, so you have a collection of cells, and those collection of cells, as you mentioned, are, notice the word here, similar. They don't have to be identical, but they're similar in function, right? But is it just function that they have to be similar in?
No, also type.
There you go.
Structure.
There we go. So if we have a collection of cells that are similar in function and or similar in structure, then those cells together form what we call a tissue. We put tissues together to form what? Organs. Excellent. Again, if I have a big, huge sheet of muscle tissue and I slap more muscle tissue on top of it, do I suddenly have an organ? Nope, I just have more muscle tissue. So notice, again, there are rules. How do we define an organ then? How do we make an organ out of tissues? Well, let's see.
Similar also?
I'm sorry?
They're also similar?
Well, they don't, in this case, they don't actually have to be similar. Like I said, if I have muscle tissue and I just add more muscle tissue on top of it, I don't suddenly have an organ. So what do I need to add on top of it instead to make it an organ?
They're responsible for vital functions.
True, many organs are responsible for vital functions, absolutely. So they're going to have some important function. That still doesn't tell me how we make one. So if I have muscle tissue and I add more muscle tissue, the same type of tissue, I don't get an organ. Then how do you think I get an organ?
So would it be a collection of different types of tissues?
Exactly. We put different tissues together with the goal of that vital function we just mentioned. And just out of curiosity, how many different tissues do you think we have to put together?
As many as you need.
Okay, that's an excellent, excellent answer for that. More of a grad school answer. Absolutely, I like that because it's appropriately vague. But let's think about this. If I just put 2 tissues together, am I going to have an organ?
Yeah.
3, 4, 2. 2 is enough to make an organ? Someone said yeah. You still say yeah?
2 or more?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You're 100% correct. 2 or more. What's the largest organ in your body?
The skin.
Skin. It's essentially 2 types of tissues. Epithelial tissue sitting on top of connective tissues. Right? 2 or more different tissues working together for some type of goal. Oops, see, I told you I get 1 letter. Of some vital function, and we have organs. What do we do with these organs? We put them together to form what?
Organ system.
There you go. How many organ systems do we have in our body? Or forming our body, really?
13
13 is a little too many.
or 11?
Excellent. We'll identify them and talk about the organs that form them later. Absolutely. Organs work together to form organ systems, and we have 11 total organ systems. And when you put those 11 organ systems together, what do you get as a result of that? What do you get when you put all 11 organ systems together?
An organism?
An organism, absolutely, an individual level. Or an organismal level, right? You have a person. Excellent. Now, can our hierarchy continue up from there?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, right? People can work together as clans or families or populations or cultures, right? At that point, we're in sociology. We're no longer in anatomy and physiology, but technically the levels can continue up. But for us, the fun part, where we want to spend our time, is right here at this level. What's fun for us is to discuss organs and organ systems. The problem, this is a hierarchy. To understand organs and organ systems, we have to understand how tissues work. To understand how tissues work, we have to talk about cells, and to have some basic understanding of cells, we unfortunately have to talk a little bit about chemistry. This chemical, cellular, and tissue layer is going to build the foundation, the bedrock for all of the rest of 430 and all of 431. So what we need to do is build this solid foundation so that we can spend our fun time in organ and organ system. And we're going to build this foundation in 2 weeks, really less. Welcome to summer school. This foundation that you're going to use for the rest of 430 and all of 431, you're going to have to learn in about 2, 4, 6 lectures. So welcome to summer school. All right, excellent. We've done this on the whiteboard. Let's look at the pretty picture from your textbook that does the same thing. Any textbook worth its salt, and yours definitely is, has one of these cute little hierarchical illustrations from the chemical to the cellular, from the cellular to the tissue, to the organ system, to the organism. All right, we have that organization. Like I said, organ and organ system is where we want to spend our time, but we have to build that foundation to work our way up to it. All right. Questions on that? So that is our goal. I appreciate wholeheartedly that, right, this sounds like a lot. I know I'm scary. I've been talking about all this doom and gloom, and I do honestly feel kind of bad about it. So we get done with class at 12:35 today, 12:45, something like that. And because I feel so bad about how horrible this summer is going to be, everybody is invited over to my house for milk and cookies. All right. If you are vaccinated, you'll get to come into the backyard. Otherwise, you can just drive by and I'll hand you a baggie that is hermetically sealed as you drive by. And again, with us being done at class at 12:35, and I've now given you the map to my house, how many people should I expect by 1?
0.
Why? I've given you a map.
You've only given us lines. You haven't told us what it is.
Right, exactly, right? Again, this is meaningless without some kind of labels, without some kind of identifications or directional terms or anything along those lines. One of the challenges with anatomy and physiology, biology in general, but especially anatomy and physiology and especially genetics, one of the big issues is that it's like learning a second language. Right? And so as that language, we need a base, we need a foundation. And because we are talking about anatomy and physiology, we're talking about the body, we are going to start with a standard vocabulary. We're going to talk about a standard a language, and we're going to talk about a standard map. That standard map is what we call anatomical position. Right? Anybody here know what anatomical position is?
Anterior, posterior, that kind of thing.
Those are terms, but do you know, so anatomical position, does anybody know what anatomical position is? None of you?
Standing upright, facing forward, feet forward, arms slightly to the side.
There you go, Brian. You've read it off. You want to demonstrate it for us? Go for it. Close. Palms facing forward. There you go. Excellent. Basically like that. That is anatomical position. Excellent. Thank you, Brian. I appreciate that. Absolutely. Hold on. Where's my... So the very first thing we have to do is we have to talk about this basic map, anatomical position. And like Brian demonstrated for us, this is what that anatomical position looks like. Standing upright, facing forward, feet pointing forward, arms to the side, and palms facing forward. Now we have a standard globe. So whenever we talk about the body, the human body, when we're discussing it, we always assume anatomical position, right? So it doesn't matter whether the person is rolled up into a ball on a gurney. It doesn't matter if they've been chopped up into pieces and spread across the front yard. We always assume anatomical position. And again, just to make sure that we're clear on this, is this the right hand or the left hand?
Right hand.
Right hand, right? We always assume the patient's point of view. So that is their right hand. We are talking about that patient. Just like you have a globe in your study, right? Or a map on your wall or any of those types of things, we have a standard map, and this is our standard map for people. Notice we have directional terms as well. On that map, we have north and south and east and west, and we're going to need that on the body as well. But also on that globe, we have names for the different things on it. Things like Iceland, things like France, right? Things like Minnesota or Sacramento. We have labels that we put on those things. And we have the exact same thing here in the body as well, right? I'm not in the classroom right now, so it's hard for me to see, but I just slapped my right thigh. Of course, that's not what we're going to call it on the exam. What would the appropriate regional term for my upper thigh be?
Femoral.
Yeah, right. If you weren't 100% sure, if you didn't know it off the top, you could have cheated and looked at this image right here. Femoral region, right? It is vitally important that you know these regional terms and know them yesterday. Because when we get to that upper thigh in the bone section of this class, skeletal system, there's a big, large bone in that upper thigh region. And guess what it's called?
Femur.
There you go. There is a large artery that passes through that region. Guess what it's called?
Femoral.
Yeah, femoral artery, absolutely. There is a large bundle of axons traveling through that area. Guess what that's called? Femoral nerve, right? There is a large muscle group in that region. Guess what it's called? Come on, upper leg. What's that muscle group called? This is the way you guys are interacting with the easy questions. This is not going to be a fun semester. It's called the quadricep, but it's called the quadricep femoris, right? These regional terms are vitally important, and you need to know them yesterday. However, knowing where Auburn Boulevard is, knowing where Madison is, knowing where Citrus Heights is useful information. But it is more important to know how these things relate to each other. Remember, one of the things that I mentioned is that I like this class because it's very straightforward. Normally, the more time we spend on a piece of information, the more important it is. This is the one exception. This slide has been on the screen for about 30 seconds now, and I'm about to switch it in a minute here. However, this could easily be 20% of your first lab exam. So it is vitally important to know these regional terms. And once you know your regional terms, oh, and there's another pretty picture of the regional terms, it is vitally important to know how they relate to each other. Someone, I think it was Brian, mentioned anterior and posterior before. Much like those directional terms on a map, north and south, these things often work in pairs. Anterior and posterior is a great example of that. What does anterior mean?
Front.
To the front. And posterior means what?
Back.
Back.
To the back. Posterior is where your posterior is, right? Most of you are sitting on it right now. However, there is an important thing to learn. One of the most important things that you'll learn in anatomy and physiology is that anatomists hate you. There are many, many ways that they show this hate to you, but one of the way they show them is by having multiple terms that mean the exact same thing. There are two terms on this that mean the exact same thing as anterior and posterior. What are they?
Dorsal and ventral.
There you go, exactly. Dorsal and ventral mean the exact same thing, right? As I mentioned, I'm an amazing artist. Well, of course, you've seen that with my map drawing skills, but let's draw an equally amazing looking person. Oh, actually, let's draw him over here. Excellent. So as we mentioned, to the front of the person, oh, let's make sure he has a nose so we know that this is the front. Although I guess his feet point that way, so. There we go. This is anterior and also posterior. Nope, sorry, not posterior. Anterior, and this is posterior. And as we mentioned, dorsal and ventral mean the exact same thing, are completely interchangeable terms, right? Which one of those two is completely interchangeable with anterior? Dorsal or ventral?
Ventral.
Ventral, excellent. And therefore dorsal is completely interchangeable with posterior. By convention, what do I mean when I say the term by convention? Anyone know?
By the standard.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good way of describing it. By convention just means that typically it is what is used. It's not a hard and fast law, but typically it's used. So you'll notice, for instance, when we talk about different parts of the anatomy, for instance, when we talk about the spinal cord, more commonly people use anterior gray horn and posterior gray horn when they're talking about the gray matter of it. But when, for instance, when they talk about the roots, they use dorsal and ventral. Again, those are by convention rules that have kind of been made that are typical, but these two terms are completely interchangeable. Anytime you could say anterior, you can also say ventral, right? Posterior and dorsal, front and back. Those you can't use, but you can use anterior, posterior, ventral, dorsal, mix and match them however you want. How do we say top and bottom?
Superior and inferior.
Inferior.
There you go. Excellent. So up here is superior and down here is inferior. Excellent. So we can use these terms in relation to each other. So for instance, if we were to talk, and here, let's go back to our list. If we were to talk about the relationship, for instance, as we were just talking about the eyes to your nose, this is a little big, let's make it a little smaller. How would you say the relationship of your eyes are in relation to your nose based on what we just finished saying?
Superior.
Yeah, the eyes are superior to the nose. Or we could turn it the other way around. We could say the nose is inferior to the eyes. Right? Does that make sense?
Yep.
Excellent. However, is there another term we could put in here that would be equally acceptable when describing the relationship of the eyes to the nose? Well, I'm asking the question, so the obvious answer is yes. So let's do it that way. What would be another appropriate term, do you think, that we could put in here that would describe the relationship of your eyes in relation to your nose?
Proximal and distal.
Close, although no, proximal and distal are similar to superior and anterior, but they're on the appendages only, the arms and legs. So we wouldn't use those there, although that's an excellent, excellent guess. You're half right, because again, those are similar terms, further from the core of the body versus closer to the core of the body, but they don't typically use that on the head. There we go. Dimitri's got it. We could also use the term lateral, because what does lateral mean?
To the side.
Good, I like that. To the side works, absolutely. If we were to draw an anterior view of a person here, here's my person, there's their body. Here, let's just use the squiggly line because it's easier. Leg, leg, apparently they're gimpy. There we go. Arm, arm. Excellent. Right. Eye, nose, mouth. Absolutely. Lateral means away from the midline of the body. There is a midline that goes down the center of the body, and lateral means away from the midline. And so what does towards the midline mean? What's the term for that?
Medial.
There you go. Excellent. So thinking about it, what is the most lateral part of your body?
Your nose.
Most lateral part of your body.
Your hands.
Your appendages, your fingers.
All right, you get partial credit for that. Be more specific.
Acromial.
No. You were closer with the hands. Be more specific though.
Your finger?
Like tarsals.
Your waist.
Even more specific.
Like fingertip.
Which one?
Middle finger.
Anatomical
thumbs?
position. Thumb. Right, in anatomical position, remember your palms are facing forward, your thumb sticks out. Your thumb is the most lateral part of the body. Of course, if I asked that on an exam and you put thumb, would you get credit for that?
No.
No, because that's not the direct, it's not the appropriate anatomical term. What is the appropriate regional term for your thumb? Anyone know? You can cheat and go back and look at the last slide.
Manus.
Now, Manus's hand. We specifically want the thumb.
Digital.
The distal?
No. Anyone figured out yet? There we go.
Pollex.
Veng's got it. Pollex. Pollex. There you go. Excellent. So that would be the lateral most. So excellent. So we've done lateral and medial. We've done superior and inferior. We've done anterior and posterior. We've done dorsal and ventral. And remember, we said these two terms are identical, interchangeable terms. But what about these two? Cephalic and caudal. What do those mean? Anyone know what cephalic means?
To the head?
To the head, excellent. And what does caudal mean? Anyone know?
The tail?
To the tail, exactly, absolutely. Notice this sounds similar to superior and inferior. It sounds like these two may be similar to superior and inferior, top and bottom. However, it turns out they are not. Again, remember, anatomists hate you. Cephalic and caudal are actually more primarily used developmentally when we are looking at embryos and things like that, when they actually have heads and tails. But it's also used a lot in the nervous system. Cephalic is towards the front of the brain, whereas caudal is towards the back of the brain. So notice in this case, because it's towards the head and towards the tail, it's not the same thing as superior and inferior. So superior and inferior are not interchangeable words, whereas anterior and ventral, posterior and dorsal are. Again, they just like to make things difficult for us because they hate you. Excellent. All right, so we've done lateral and medial, superior and inferior, anterior, posterior, cephalic and caudal, dorsal and ventral. Excellent. That brings us to our next two, prone and supine. What do those terms mean?
On your stomach or on your back.
Excellent. Which one is which?
Prone is on your stomach and supine's on your back.
There you go. So prone would be if, for instance, you were getting ready to do a push-up, whereas supine would be where you were getting ready to do a stomach crunch, right? Again, we always assume anatomical position, but as we mentioned, the body isn't always going to be an anatomical position. So having terms that can describe this relationship is useful. Let's talk about some more examples. Let's talk about our elbow and our wrist. How would you describe the relationship between your elbow and your wrist? Your elbow is what in relation to your wrist?
Superior.
That is absolutely the obvious answer, and it is 100% incorrect. It is definitely further from the floor than your wrist is, but as I mentioned, anatomists hate you. So while obviously superior is away from the floor, inferior is towards the floor, they don't use those terms on the appendages, the arms and the legs. So when we're talking about the elbow and the wrist, or we're talking about the knee and the ankle, they don't actually use superior and inferior. Instead, they have a different term. So
Proximal.
the elbow is proximal. Absolutely. Proximal means closer to the core of the body. So the elbow is closer to the core of the body than the wrist is. Distal means further from the core. So we could flip it around and say the wrist is distal to the elbow.
And that's like if, well, I guess not, just standing in the regular position, it's just closer to your heart core.
Well,
Not necessarily sticking it out.
core just means trunk of the body. Yeah, absolutely. So same thing here, the knee and the ankle. The knee would be proximal, closer to the core of the body, closer to the trunk of the body, whereas the ankle is further away. But we can get a little trickier than that. What if we have shoulder, elbow, and wrist? How would we relate the directional terms for those three items?
Shoulder's
Well,
proximal to the elbow. The wrist is distal to the elbow.
So absolutely, the shoulder is proximal, the wrist is distal. But then how do we describe the relationship of the elbow? Do we have to say the elbow is distal to the shoulder but proximal to the wrist? Or is there another way we can say that sentence with just one word?
Could it be intermediate?
There you go.
Or...
Intermediate, in between. Notice not medial. Remember, medial means towards the midline, where your belly button is, where your nose is. No, intermediate is in between. Notice this works other ways as well. What is the relationship with your ribs and your heart? How do your ribs relate to the relationship of your heart?
Superficial.
There you go. Right. And it really is superficial. Notice the ribs, some of the part of the ribs are in front of it, some of it are behind it, some of it is lateral to it. So the one term that fits in here for all of it is that your ribs are superficial to your heart. If your heart is superficial to your ribs, please see a doctor immediately. Right? But again, we can add a third component in here. If we throw that third object in there, skin, then how do we describe the relationship of these three structures? The skin would be
Superficial.
The heart would be
Deep.
And the ribs would be
Intermediate.
Intermediate. There you go. See how easy that is? There you go. We just keep checking boxes. Now, notice we've covered almost everything on this list, and I think most of this stuff is pretty intuitive. Most of you have heard these terms or are familiar with these terms, but then we have our very last two terms here, contralateral and ipsilateral. These are probably less familiar terms. Like cephalic and caudal, they're primarily used in the nervous system or developmental. But what does that mean? Any idea what contralateral and ipsilateral means? Well, let's use an example of it in action. If I want to wave my right hand to you, where do I actually make that decision and start that process?
Brain.
Brain, excellent. Where on my brain?
The left side?
If I'm moving my right hand, where do I make that decision? Yeah, left side of my brain. Notice I make a decision over here on the left that travels down my spinal cord where it has to cross the midline of the body to go to my right hand. And we call that contralateral. Contralateral basically involves crossing the midline of the body. So when you cross the midline of the body, like making that conscious decision to wave my hand, that is a contralateral signal that starts on my left and goes to my right. Notice if I put my hand on something hot, what happens when I put my hand on something hot?
You pull it away. Flinch.
Yeah, do I even have to think about it? Am I sitting there going, hey, my hand is on fire. That hurts a lot. I should do something about it. Yes, let's do something about it. Why don't you move your hand? That's a great idea. And then I consciously move my hand out of the way. No, if you touch something hot, you pull your hand away before you're even aware of the fact that you should be cursing. Right? Why does that happen? Well, the reason it happens is because we have an electrical signal, a pain signal that travels from my hand up to my spinal cord, where my spinal cord makes a decision on that and sends the information back to the muscle telling me to move my hand out of the way. What do we call that process?
Reflex.
Yeah, reflex, right? Oops. We call that process a reflex. That reflex, notice, starts on the right side of my body, goes to the spinal cord, goes back to my right arm to move my right arm. Notice that information never crosses the midline. So ipsilateral information or an ipsilateral pathway does not cross the midline. Everything stays. It does not cross the midline. So that ipsilateral does not cross the midline. Contralateral does. All right. Questions on this?
So are those two only in relation to like nerve responses and
No, great question. I'm so glad that you asked that. It is most commonly used for that, but it doesn't have to be used that way. And that was actually going to bring me to my next point. And I'm so glad you asked this question, because one of the best ways to learn this information, your directional terms and your regional terms, is the exact same way that you got to know Sacramento, by giving driving lessons, right? Again, this is easier on campus because I know how to get from campus, right? You come out of the parking lot onto College Oaks, take a right on College Oaks, which brings you to Auburn Boulevard. Take a left on Auburn Boulevard. Follow that, take a right on Madison, so on and so forth, right? You can give these driving directions to get from one place to another. Well, you can do the exact same thing with the body. In fact, if you have little kids that are bothering you all the time, this is an excellent way to use them to study. Get a paintbrush and washable paint, or even just a paintbrush and dip it in water, and give driving directions from one part of their body to the other. Let's say, for instance, you wanted to go from the right brachial region to the left patellar region. Starting in the brachial region, you would go proximal to the acromial region. From the acromial region, you would go medially to the thoracic region, to the right thoracic region, right? You would then go contralateral to the left thoracic region, inferior to the left hypochondrial region, and so forth, so on and so forth. So again, using these directional terms, using these regional terms, like with a paintbrush, you can give driving directions from one part of the body to another. It's a great way to learn this information, and it makes a pretty good essay question on an exam. All right. Excellent. Questions on that? Again, you've seen my amazing drawing skills. I've done an awesome job of drawing these, but of course you've got a table in your textbook that shows these directional and organizational terms as well. All right, like I said, this stuff could easily be 20% of your exam, so make sure you are learning these. Now, this is all useful, like I said, when you're giving driving directions, when you have that paintbrush and paint or water that you're using it, but it's also convenient when studying the human body to cut the human body into pieces. When we cut the human body into pieces, one cut into two parts, what's one of the ways we can divide the body into two pieces? One cut, divide the body into two pieces. How would you describe those two pieces?
Upper body and lower body.
Okay, top and bottom. Of course, top and bottom are common terms, or upper and lower are common terms. So what would the appropriate term for a top part and a bottom part be?
Superior, inferior.
There you go. Excellent. We could have superior and inferior pieces. Excellent. Anybody know what we call it? The type of section you would make that would cut the body into top parts and bottom parts? Yeah, this is what is known as a transverse section, or also what is known as a cross section. Excellent. So we have transverse sections or cross sections. That would be a top part and a bottom part. How many transverse sections can you make of the human body?
Infinite?
Yeah, absolutely, an infinite, right? If I cut off what's left of my hair, do I have a top part and a bottom part? Yeah, if I cut off the corns on the bottom of my feet, do I have a top part and a bottom part? Absolutely, and any cut in between. There is truly an infinite number of transverse sections that can be made of the human body. All right, what's another way we can cut the body instead of top and bottom?
Left and right.
Left and right. Of course, we want to use the correct anatomical terms. So what is the correct anatomical terms for left and right parts?
Posterior and interior.
No, that's front and back.
Oh,
Right and left are the correct terms. So absolutely, those are the correct terms. Left and right are the two parts. Now, when we cut the body into two parts, left and right, what do we call that type of section? Not a bad guess. Lateral and medial parts might be a good way of describing them, but no, it's just left part and a right part. We do have those. That is, the left and right are appropriate anatomical terms. Anyone know what we call a section that cuts the body into a left piece and a right piece?
Sagittal?
There we go. It is a sagittal section, absolutely. All right. How many sagittal sections do you think we can take of the human body?
Also infinite.
Yeah, absolutely. Also an infinite amount. However, there is something special here. There is one special sagittal section. That special sagittal section is right on the midline. And when you cut the body right on the midline, you make two, oops, not wrong two, equal and opposite parts. And that's a cut right on the midline, makes us two equal and opposite parts. And we call that one special section, we call it a mid-sagittal. Or because it's on the midline, we also call it a medial section. So right on the midline, two equal and opposite pieces, we call that a mid-sagittal or a medial section. And then of course, all the rest, right? If I cut off my right thumb, I have a right part and I have a left part, right? Through the shoulder, I have a left part and a right part. All the rest don't give us equal parts. And so the rest of those infinite number of sagittal sections we call parasagittal. Now, let's go back to the transverse section. Is there a place where we can cut the body in half where the top and bottom halves are equal and opposite to each other?
No.
No, that's hopefully the top of your body does not look like the bottom of your body. So notice for this one, there's no special section. They're just all transverse or all cross. Any other ways we can cut the body into two parts? I think someone mentioned it already.
Anterior, posterior.
There you go, absolutely, anterior, posterior, or what we would commonly refer to as front is back. But you are absolutely correct that we should appropriately use the terms anterior and posterior. Or what else could we use instead?
Dorsal and ventral.
There you go. Although let's put them in the same order. Ventral for the front and dorsal for the back. Excellent. Anyone know what we call it when we cut the body into front pieces and back pieces? Actually, I know for a fact you know, because it is named after the same term you would use if you were, for instance, putting a crown on your head. And as we've all learned, right, most of us knew before because of the Mexican beer, but we've all learned it now. What is the term they use for crown?
Corona.
There you go. It's a coronal section. Or what is also sometimes referred to as a frontal section. And of course, let's beat the dead horse. How many coronal sections can you take? Infinite number. And does the front of you look like the back of you?
Sure hope not.
Exactly. So no special sections. Right, even if it looks like you put your pants on backwards, the front of you does not look like the back of you. So there are no special sections of the frontal plane or coronal plane. Excellent. All right. Questions on this? Notice here we've done it with all the pretty words, but your book has got this great picture that does a really nice job of showing this. Notice here it shows both the sections of the body and also the planes of section, and then the sections you would receive from it. A sagittal section from the sagittal plane, a frontal section gives us a frontal plane, a transverse section gives us a transverse plane. And notice that these are all at 90-degree angles to each other. These are what are known as the cardinal sections, because they all form 90-degree angles with each other. However, when I've got a body and I've got a hacksaw, am I required to always cut it at perfect 90-degree angles? Or could I just take my saw and just whack it, right, angularly like that, or like this, or like that, or something like that? I can cut it at any old angle I want to. So while we have these three cardinal planes of section, we need some term that we can use for any of these off-angle planes. Anyone know the term we use for a plane of section that isn't on one of the cardinal planes?
Oblique.
Yeah, exactly. We call it an oblique section. If the section is not on one of those cardinal planes, then any other cut of the body is considered an oblique section. So basically, there are four different ways, four different planes of section we can make of the body: sagittal, frontal, transverse, or oblique. All right. Questions on that? Excellent. All right. This is useful because there's all sorts of fun stuff inside the human body, right? We're not like one of those Easter bunnies where we got the chocolate on the outside and it's just hollow on the inside, right? There's stuff inside there. Although I guess technically we are hollow on the inside. We do indeed have body cavities. When we're talking about those body cavities, we have two main body cavities. And again, these are our general terms. Our dorsal body cavity. Guess where our dorsal body cavity is?
Back.
Yeah, it's towards the back. Absolutely. And this dorsal body cavity is formed up of two more specific cavities. One of them is our cranial cavity. What is contained within our cranial cavity?
Brain.
Brain. And what forms the cranial cavity?
The skull.
Skill.
The bones of the skull. Excellent. The dorsal body cavity is also made up of the vertebral or spinal cavity. What does the vertebral cavity contain?
Spine.
Spinal cord. Excellent. And what forms the vertebral cavity?
Your spine.
Well, or more specifically, the bones of the vertebrae.
The bones of the
Absolutely.
spine.
Yeah, absolutely. The bones of the spine are the bones of the vertebrae. Absolutely. All right. Here we see a pretty picture from your textbook that shows this. So here in yellow is our dorsal body cavity made up of the cranial cavity formed by the bones of the skull and our vertebral cavity made up of the bones of the vertebrae. Now, this is where we get to our next very important point in this class. One of the things that I will remind you about before every single exam you ever take is that people often lose points not because they don't know the information, but because they don't read the questions carefully. You have to read the questions carefully so that you can answer them correctly. There is a tremendous amount of information in this class. Again, it's what I love about it. It is hard. So I will be very specific and I will be very precise about how I ask my questions. I expect you to be equally precise in your answering of them. Notice here, I have two arrows with two labels. If I had this image on the exam, and question 1 on the exam is identify the general cavity, would the answers for A and B be the same or would they be different?
Different.
So what would the answer for A be if I asked for the general cavity? Dorsal body cavity. What would the answer to B be if I asked for the general cavity?
Vertebral.
Nope, not for the general one.
Still dorsal.
Still dorsal. So notice A and B is the same answer. for this one. For both of these, the general cavity is dorsal. However, if instead, question 1 was identify the specific cavity, now are A and B the same or different?
Different.
Different.
What's the answer for A?
Cranial.
What's the answer for B?
Vertebral.
Vertebral.
Excellent. I will be very, very precise. I spend a tremendous amount of time and effort being very precise in my wording of my questions. And I expect you to be equally precise. If I ask you to give me the general cavity that is B, and you say vertebral, you are showing me that you have some knowledge. However, did you answer the question that I asked you?
No.
No. And if you don't answer the question I ask you, then I can't give you credit for that. Again, people often lose points not because they don't know the information, but because they don't read the questions carefully. Read the questions carefully so that you can answer them correctly. Something like this is a simple error that is easy to make. So you have to be careful. You have to be cautious. All right, let's go back. I don't think I have a picture of it anymore, so let's cheat. On the exam, if I had this picture and I had an arrow here and I asked you to identify that specific region of the body, what would your answer be? Excellent. And Vang gets partial credit for that on the exam. Why only partial credit?
The anterior pollex.
Nope, not because it's anterior. Even simpler than that.
Right side.
Right pollex. Absolutely. I know that seems nitpicky, but think of it this way. If you are having knee surgery and the nurse rolls you into the doctor and says to the doctor, right, remove the ACL. Do you want him to just flip a coin to decide which knee he's going to do the surgery on? No, right and left matters, right? Don't lose partial credit because you got the hard part by saying pollex and you forgot the easy part by saying right. Right? Those are free points that you're giving me back that I don't want. Be precise, be specific, read the questions carefully. Read the questions carefully so you can answer them correctly. All right? Again, I will warn you about that many, many times. And again, it happens all the time. Read the question carefully so you can answer them correctly. Give me the knowledge that I'm asking you for. All right? Questions on that? All right, excellent. We did the dorsal body cavity, which is easy. The ventral body cavity gets a little bit more complicated. And we've been talking for another hour or so. This is a good point to take a quick break. Let's go ahead and take our next break. We'll do this here. So I will take another 15-minute break. It is 10:37 now, so we will restart at, what'll that be? 52. Start the recording at that time. I'm writing this here, although I'm going to write it down because I'm going to see if I can figure out why the heck I can't get on to Mastering A and P. Recording 10:52. So I'm going to shut this down. I'm not going to shut down Zoom. We're still going to be in here, but I'm going to stop sharing the image. So write that down. Back in 15 minutes. So any questions before we take our next break? All right, everyone's cameras shake. Oh, all right, excellent. So I will see you guys in 15 minutes. Oh, wait, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, excellent. See you guys in 15 minutes. All righty. So let's dive back in. Any questions before we get started? We just left off. We started talking about the body cavities. We had talked about the dorsal body cavity, the two specific spaces that make up the general space that is the dorsal body cavity. And we were about to dive into the ventral body cavity. So any questions before we get started?
Nope.
All right, excellent. Then again, because we want to be precise with our information, obviously ventral body cavity is a general term, our ventral body cavity. And our ventral body cavity can be divided anatomically into two more specific cavities. Now let's unpack this a little bit. What do you think I mean when I say it can be divided anatomically into two specific cavities?
Into like
You talk about
structures.
So when I say divided anatomically, you've got absolutely the right idea. There is actually a physical structure, a physical barrier in the ventral body cavity that divides it in half. And what might that be?
the diaphragm.
Exactly. The diaphragm, one of the muscles of our body's muscular system, is a physical barrier that actually divides the ventral body cavity into two more specific cavities. Above the diaphragm is the thoracic body cavity. And below that is the abdominal pelvic body cavity. Excellent. Now, these are definitely more specific, but these thoracic and abdominal pelvic body cavities can be further divided into even more specific. All right, whoever's packing their car or something, can you please mute your microphone? I didn't want to mute everybody, but I guess I can just do that and people can unmute themselves again. Excellent. Into even more specific. So really that makes our thoracic and abdominal pelvic make some kind of intermediate terms. That can be divided into even more specific cavities. And let's start easy. The abdominal pelvic cavity can be divided into two specific cavities. And what do you think the two specific cavities of the abdominal pelvic cavity are?
The abdomen and the pelvis.
Yeah, exactly. The abdominal cavity. Sometimes the answers really are just that easy. And the pelvic cavity. Now, are these divided anatomically? Is there a physical barrier that separates the abdominal cavity from the pelvic cavity?
No.
No, exactly, right? So it's possible, for instance, a little bit of the small intestine could move out of the abdominal cavity into the pelvic cavity. We can get some mish and some mash that way. However, should some of your small intestine ever get up here into your thoracic cavity? No, that would be a very, very bad thing, right? If that occurs, please see a doctor immediately. Absolutely. So these are not divided anatomically. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't some anatomical structures that define them. The pelvis, for instance, the pelvic cavity is defined by the bones of the pelvis, for instance, but they don't form a physical barrier between the two. All right, excellent. We will talk about the thoracic cavity with a different picture because it is also further divided as well. But there's one other thing that I want to talk about. The organs found in these cavities, both the dorsal and the ventral body cavity, are our internal organs. And the internal organs in the, oops, where's my arrow? There it is. In the ventral body cavity are what we call our viscera, or our visceral organs. Viscera is, of course, a noun. If we were to instead say visceral organs, then of course visceral is the adjective that describes the noun being the organs. Again, fun with vocabulary. And do we just throw them all in there and hope for the best? Like when you ship that vase to grandma's house, you just put it in a big box and hope for the best when it gets there?
Nope.
No, of course not. So we want to protect these. So both the organs, the brain and the spinal cord, and all of our visceral organs are protected by layers of connective tissue that wrap around and support them. In our ventral body cavity, we call these collectively, there's actually 3 layers of connective tissue, and we call them the meninges. Excellent. And in the abdominal and and in the ventral body cavity, they're protected by what we call our serous membranes. Or again, serous is the adjective describing the nouns. We call them serosa. Excellent. Now, the thoracic cavity is divided into 3 distinct regions. So let's take a look at that. To do that, though, we need to change our plane of section. What plane of section was this again? What plane of section are we looking at here?
Anterior.
Well, it's, yeah, frontal or coronal, absolutely. This would be a frontal or coronal section of the body, absolutely. And notice if we look at it, the thoracic cavity is divided into 3, really kind of 3.5 cavities or regions inside of it. Notice over here, we have the right pleural cavity. Over here, we have the left pleural cavity. And in between, let's use a different color that'll stand out better. We have a region that is known as the mediastinum. However, inside of the mediastinum is a smaller cavity that contains the heart, known as the pericardial cavity. So notice if we change our point of view a little bit, what plane of section is this?
Transverse.
Transverse section, excellent. Is this a superior or an inferior view?
Superior.
All right, I've heard superior. Anyone think otherwise? Don't make me waste the time to like make a poll in the Zoom where you guys all have to answer. Holler out. Superior, anterior, or superior, inferior view.
It could be either or.
Inferior. It's inferior.
All right, so excellent. Now I've heard both, and that's what I wanted. Excellent. It can't be both, though. I did hear that. This can't be both. I'm talking about this specific view right now. One of the challenges to this class is we've got to get used to looking at the body from different points of view, right? So basically what we've done here is we've cut a slice out of a person with a cross section, that transverse section, we figured that out. And we're either looking at it from the top or we're looking at it from the bottom, and we need to figure that out. And to do that, we need to orient ourselves. So let's start easy. Is this particular body, as we look at it, in a prone or in a supine position?
Supine.
Supine. Right? Notice here is its spinal cord. Here is its vertebrae of the back. So this is posterior, right? They've gotten that as well. Anterior. So anterior is up. So this person is laying on their back. They're supine. What that means is when we cut them in half, their head was either in here in the classroom with me, and the feet were through the screen, or the feet were in here with me, and the head is through the screen. So which is it? Do I have the head or do I have the feet in this room with me?
You have the head. It's inferior because the right lung is on the left side.
So if the right, so if you got the right idea. This is indeed the right lung. So if this is the right lung, if their head was in here and they were laying down this way, would this be the right lung over here on this side to the left?
Yes.
Really? So if I laid down like this right now and you cut me in half, this would, over here on this side of the screen, would be the right lung.
No.
No. So notice their head is in the screen and their feet is here in the room with me. They're laying this way with their head behind my screen and their feet sticking through. So that means I am looking at this cut section and their head is through the screen. So I'm looking at the bottom of this section. So this is indeed an inferior view. See how we figured that out? Again, it gets easier the more you do this, but that's one of the things you should do. When you see an image like this, you need to be able to orient yourself to figure out what it is that you're looking at. How am I looking at the body? So it's one of the first things you should do when you see a section like this, is figure out how exactly it is that you're looking at the body. This is an inferior view of a transverse section. Excellent. All of which has absolutely nothing to do with the body cavities, but it is an important exercise that we need to make sure we're capable of doing. So notice as we look at this, here, surrounding our right lung is our right pleural cavity. Surrounding our left lung is our left pleural cavity. And colored here in yellow in the middle is that space known as the mediastinum. However, within the mediastinum, there is also a cavity that surrounds the heart. And that cavity that surrounds the heart, contained within the mediastinum, is our pericardial cavity. So notice we have two pleural cavities, right and left. All right. And this is important. You haven't thought about it this way, but you know each lung is individually shrink wrapped, because there you were on the bar Friday night, right? Now that you're vaccinated, we can get back out into the bars, right? Which is, of course, the most important thing that you can do once you're vaccinated, is be able to drink alcohol around other people and get into massive, important debates about the most important philosophical concepts known to mankind. And right now, primarily, that's which Jonas brother is cutest, right? Of course, everybody knows it's Joe, but there are a couple who incorrectly believe it may be Nick, and these things can get very heated. Knives can come out, and if suddenly you got cut in the side, your lung would collapse as a result of that from that slice through the ribs. However, you're going to die as a result of it.
Good.
Could, but probably not, because each lung is individually shrink wrapped. And so while your left lung may collapse, as long as there's not too much blood in the thoracic cavity, your right lung will stay inflated and will allow you to breathe till you can get to the hospital. The reason for this, as we've talked about and as we've seen here, we can see here, is there is that serous membrane that I mentioned that wraps around the organs and lines the cavity to provide that protection. That serous membrane that I talked about. Notice there's a serous membrane that wraps around the left lung, one that wraps around the right lung, and a separate one that wraps around the heart. Each of these have those serous membranes that wrap around them, providing that protection. All right. Here's the pretty picture from your textbook showing this. Again, notice our general term is here, in this case, thoracic. However, remember, we can be even more general. Would be the ventral body cavity. So while this is general in terms of these regions, we could also think of this as being intermediate. And then we have the more specific cavities, and those are the left pleural cavity, the right pleural cavity, the mediastinum, which also contains the pericardial cavity. Again, thoracic's a little bit wonkier. Abdominal pelvic's a little bit easier in that we have the abdominal cavity and the pelvic cavity, but right? Our anatomists never want to make things easy for us. And abdominal pelvic cavity is a really large region. It's a really large cavity in the body. So what they've conveniently done for it is to distinguish it into more specific areas. One of the ways we can divide the abdominal pelvic cavity into more specific areas is by dividing them into quadrants. As you can see, we have both a horizontal and a vertical line that go through the umbilicus, right through the belly button, and it divides the abdominal pelvic cavity into 4 quadrants with, as you can see, very technical names: right upper, right lower, left lower. And so when defining organs, like for instance, what quadrant would your spleen be in? Anyone know where their spleen is? All right, I'll make it easier for you.
Upper.
Left lower.
No, the spleen would actually be in the left upper. The spleen is located right about there. Okay, let's make it easier. Liver, where would your liver be?
Left lower.
Liver?
Is the right upper?
Right upper.
Right upper, yeah. The liver is your largest visceral organ, takes up most of the right upper quadrant. What quadrant or quadrants would your bladder be in?
Right.
And left.
Right
lower.
and left lower.
Right, left lower.
There you go, right and left lower, basically in that location right there. What quadrant would your left lung be in?
Left upper quadrant.
Is that correct?
Right?
You could
Left
get
lung?
the thoracic cavity.
Exactly. Remember that anatomical diaphragm is that anatomical boundary between the abdominal pelvic and the thoracic. And so the lung is not in the abdominal pelvic cavity. It's not in any of the quadrants. It's above it, right? The diaphragm is the roof of the abdominal pelvic cavity. So again, purposely asked the tricky question here. Don't ask that on the exam, but I want to make sure we understand that is the roof. So anything above it, like the lungs, are not in the abdominal pelvic quadrants. Quadrants still aren't very specific. So if we don't want to draw lines through the belly button, instead, we can play tic-tac-toe. And if we play tic-tac-toe, then we see that there are 9 specific regions. These regions, from top to bottom, from right to left, are the right hypochondriac region, epigastric region, left hypochondriac region, right lumbar, umbilical, left lumbar, right inguinal, or also iliac, hypogastric, or also pubic, and left inguinal, or iliac. Now, like I said, this is often like learning a new language, and we often get many alphabet soup terms. These alphabet soup terms are a bear because you're going to have to spell them, but often with these alphabet soup terms, they tell you everything you need to know about them. Hypochondriac is a great example. Now, we, of course, when I say the term hypochondriac, everybody thinks of someone who pretends they're sick or thinks they're sick all the time, right? And that's where that name has come from. But let's break it down. Hypochondriac, what does hypo mean?
Below.
Below. Anybody know what chondric refers to?
I think it's the diaphragm.
Close. It's not the diaphragm, but it's actually the chondriac refers to the cartilage of the ribs.
Oh.
So notice hypochondriac tells you exactly where it is. It is below the cartilage of the ribs. What does epi mean?
Above.
Above. What does gastric refer to?
The stomach.
Stomach. So epigastric is above the stomach. The name tells you everything about it, right? And here we see it all put together. So like on the exam, we were just talking about those regions. And remember, we're just talking about the liver. So here, as I mentioned, that liver is the biggest and the largest of the visceral organs. So based on that, and when I look at my red lines here for my tic-tac-toe board, right? As I look at the tic-tac-toe board and I look at the relationship of the liver, what are the quadrant or quadrants that the liver is found in? Here, does it help if we go back?
The right upper quadrant.
Right upper and left upper.
There you go, right upper and left upper, right? Notice if instead you had said right hypochondriac, epigastric, right lumbar, and maybe a little bit dips into the umbilical region, you are definitely showing me knowledge. In fact, you answered the harder question. But what did I ask? Did I ask for the regions?
No.
No, I asked for the quadrants. So it's a perfect example of losing points, not because you don't know the information, but because you don't answer the question correctly, right? Saying these 4 regions shows me massive knowledge. You answered a harder question, right? But you didn't answer the right question. And that's the challenge with that. You have to be careful. Now notice there is going to be some slough on this. So for instance, look right here, we see the gallbladder. Notice here the gallbladder is located in, for this illustration, in the umbilical region. Does that mean that every single person in this class, their gallbladder is in the umbilical region? No, for some of us, because we all have all sorts of different variations, it might be up here a little bit in the epigastric, or even slightly over here to the side in the right lumbar. But where it's never going to be is in the left lumbar, or in the left umbilical. I mean, the left inguinal, right? Or in the hypogastric. So yes, there can be some slough on some of these answers, but your right kidney is never going to be on the left side of the body. Your left kidney is never going to be on the right side of the body, and so on and so forth. So again, there's going to be some slough on these things, but so I'll allow some leeway with these things as we're seeing it. Notice the spleen, for instance, here is sneaking down a little bit into the left lumbar region. So, because everybody's not exact, but it's never going to be down here in the left inguinal, for instance. All right. So both know the quadrants and the regional terms, but also know the relative relationship of the organs. Know where you'd find it, because I could ask questions both ways on the exam. I could ask you to identify 2 organs found in the umbilical region, or I could ask you to identify the regions where you would find the bladder. I will ask questions both ways on the exams. All right, questions on that? All right, excellent. So, as I mentioned, and again, I'm going through this again, the internal organs in both the dorsal and the ventral cavities are protected. They're not just randomly thrown in there. We want to bubble wrap and saran wrap to make sure that they're safe. As I mentioned, in the dorsal body cavity, our brain and our spinal cord are protected by 3 layers of connective tissue known as the meninges. And we'll save our discussion of that for when we get to the nervous system. What I want to talk about now is the serous membranes that line our ventral body cavity. Another important rule to remember in anatomy and physiology is lots of things are named by their location. All right. This is my iPhone, right? How many of these are there on the planet?
Yours specifically, just one.
Well, no, but I mean, how many iPhones are there on the planet?
Millions.
I think this is an 8. So how many iPhone 8s do you think there are? Yeah, millions, absolutely, right? And they're all exactly the same. until it got to my house. And now it's got my pictures in it. It's got my OtterBox because I'm dropping this thing all over the place because I'm klutzy that way. Right, my pictures on it, my information, my apps, all of those things. But it's exactly the same as every other iPhone that's out there on the planet. The only difference is this one's sitting on my desk with my stuff on it. So by definition, by its location, it is Daniel Slutsky's iPhone. All right. And the same thing is true for these serous membranes. When we have a serous membrane is a double membrane. Basically, the example that I like the best, that I think that works the best for this is, let's say, for instance, we had my fist. There's my fist. And I was going to shove my fist into a partially filled balloon. All right, so here's my fist again. And now we'll surround it. We'll make it a little bigger, change the color. By that balloon, what's going to happen is that the balloon is going to collapse along the surface of my fingers as I shove my hand into it. But it's partially filled with air, so it's not going to collapse completely. What's going to happen is, because there's a little bit of air inside of this, some of it's going to bulge out. And as it bulges out, basically, notice I have two layers to this balloon. I have one layer that is in direct contact with my hand, and one layer that's forming the cavity. Forms or lines the cavity. And one that lines the organs. However, if I were to take a pair of scissors and cut a small piece of the balloon right here, and cut a small piece of the balloon right here, and look at them under the microscope, would they look the same or would they look different?
The same.
Same. It's the exact same balloon. The only difference is their location. So, based on location, and that is the term we can use, we call the layer that lines the organ the visceral layer. All right. After all, as we said, it's a visceral organ. So what lines the visceral organ? The visceral layer. The part that forms or lines the cavity, based on location, we will call the parietal layer. And this doesn't just work for balloons and for fingers, right? This works with the heart, for instance. All right, let's take a moment here. We'll do this really carefully. Draw an anatomically accurate heart. Perfect, excellent. And that heart is going to have a layer of serous, nope, not what I wanted. A layer of serous membrane that lines the outer surface of it. But that is continuous with a layer that forms a space around the heart as well. And so once again, we have a layer that is forming the cavity, forming the walls, and a layer that lines the surface of the heart. So this is visceral. And this would be a little bigger, parietal. Now, in our balloon, we have air in this cavity. And here, indeed, we have a cavity as well. Is this cavity here filled with air? What do you think? There you go. Samuel's got it. Fluid. Now, careful though, it's not filled with fluid, but you have the right idea. There is a layer of fluid on the surface of the heart and a layer of fluid that lines the cavity. Any idea what we would call this fluid inside of a serous membrane? There you go. What's that serous fluid there for?
Lubrication.
Protection.
Absolutely. That serous cavity is lined with a serous fluid to reduce friction. Your heart should be beating numerous times every day. It doesn't get weekends or holidays off or anything like that. Continuous and nonstop. And so we want to have that reduced friction environment for all of that activity. So it is lined with a serous fluid. So we have a double membrane, visceral and parietal, that lines the heart. However, as we also talked about, our lung, which of course looks like a triangle, also has a serous membrane that lines its surface. Siri thinks I'm talking to her. And forms a cavity around it. Remember, we talked about how that cavity surrounded the lung. And so once again, we have a layer of serous membrane that is in contact with the surface of the lung and one forming that fluid-filled cavity. Again, I know my drawing's getting sloppier, but you get the idea because I want to get to the more important points. And of course, once again, we are going to call this one visceral. And we are going to call this one parietal. Now, I have one more question for you. If I were to take my box again, and I were to cut out a little piece of this parietal membrane and a little piece of this parietal membrane and look at them under the microscope, do you think they would be same or do you think they'd be different? What do you think? Both are parietal serous membranes. Do you think histologically, when we look at them under the microscope, they look the same or they look different?
Different.
Turns out they're identical. Serous membranes are serous membranes. In fact, when we talk about tissues, we'll actually learn what tissues make them up. So guess what the big difference between this parietal membrane is and this parietal membrane?
Location.
Location. So once again, we have to give them a specific name based on their location. This one here, the serous membrane that wraps around the heart, guess what we call it? Because it wraps around the perimeter of the heart.
Parietal pericardium.
Yeah. So this one is the parietal pericardium. This is the visceral pericardium. And the ones associated with the lungs are the parietal pleura or the visceral pleura. Plus, it gets even more fun because remember, as I mentioned, each lung is individually shrink wrapped. So in this case, because of course we always assume anatomical position, this would be the left visceral pleura, and this would be the right visceral pleura. Again, I appreciate my drawings are not the bestest, so let's cheat and go back a couple slides to this one. Notice we hadn't labeled them, but we had already talked about all these things. Notice right here, lining the cavity, is the right parietal pleura. Lining the lung is the right visceral pleura. Lining the cavity around the heart is the parietal pericardium. Lining the surface of the heart is the visceral pericardium. Lining the surface of the left lung is the visceral left pleura or pleural membrane. And lining the cavity is the left parietal pleura or pleural membrane. So here we see all of these serous membranes histologically are completely identical. The only difference about them is their location. They're either on the organ or off the organ, forming the cavity, so either visceral or parietal, and depending on which organ they wrap around, determines what their name is. Now, does that mean in the abdominal pelvic cavity, every single organ in the abdominal pelvic cavity has its own name for its own? There's the stomach serosa and the liver serosa and the small intestine serosa and the large intestine serosa and so on and so forth? What do you think? Anatomists do hate us, so it is a safe bet, but it turns out it's not. All of the serous membranes in the abdominal pelvic cavity are known as the peritoneum or peritoneal. And of course, if it's on an organ like the stomach, like the liver, like the small intestine, it's going to be visceral. And if it's lining the cavity, it's going to be parietal. I went through that quickly, so let's go through it again. We have our serous membranes that are parietal and visceral. Remember, like the fist in the balloon or like the heart in its serous membrane, visceral is in contact with the organ. Parietal lines or forms the cavity. And so the cavity is inside of that, lined with that little bit of serous membrane, serous fluid for lubrication. Here in the thoracic cavity, we have the two pleural cavities over the left and right lungs. In the mediastinum, most things in the mediastinum don't have a serous membrane on them. The one exception is the heart. The heart has a serous membrane, the pericardium. And I already did that here, so I don't have to do that again. And then everything in the abdominal pelvic cavity is lined with a peritoneum, either visceral or parietal. All right. Questions on that? All right, excellent. We've named the cavities. We've identified some of the organs inside of the cavities. We've done all of that stuff. And it is important to know about the organs, know about their membranes, know about where they're found, their locations and all of that. But it isn't all just about organs, right? Our body is mostly water as well, and we have to talk a lot about water, all right? Us here in Sacramento, although this example gets less and less relevant the further and further out we go, but us here in Sacramento know better than most that where water is distributed in the body is vitally important for function. Because if you were to ingest a massive amount of water in a very short period of time to win what is now an incredibly outdated video gaming system, right, where you try not to wee to win a Wii, what happens when those water levels get disrupted? Come on, someone's got to be old enough to remember.
You die.
Exactly, right? Led to cellular damage, which led to organ failure, which led to death. So knowing where the water is in your body and where it is located and how it moves around is going to be vitally, vitally important for us. We're mostly big bags of water. As you can see here, right? 60% of your body weight is water. All right, over 40 liters total. The majority of that is actually found inside of our cells. So there's a massive amount of water inside of our cells, but there's also a fair amount of water outside the cells as well. When it's outside the cells, it is typically found in one of two locations. It is either found in our interstitial fluid, which is the water that surrounds the cells, or it is in the humors of the body. What do I mean when I say the humors of the body? The funny stuff? Anyone know what I mean when I say humors? Humors are the fluids of the body, right? That mostly means the plasma of our blood, but it also means your lymph. It also means the serous fluids we talked about, things along those lines as well. And those humors of the body, the blood plasma, the interstitial fluid is constantly being exchanged, which is why you drink a massive amount of water, all that excess water gets into your plasma of your blood, which gets into your interstitial fluids surrounding all your cells, disrupting the function of those cells, like I said, leading to cellular death, organ failure, and ultimately the death of the individual. So we always have to think about the body is made up of stuff and water. And so we're going to need to talk about controlling and paying attention to both of those things. All right, questions on that? All righty. That is everything I wanted to do from a lecture standpoint today. However, we still do have a lab component, and we are doing good on time because unfortunately we avoided our introduction part, half of our introduction to the mastering A&P stuff. But please take a look at that stuff on your own, and we'll talk about it more on the other one. Let's go ahead and take one more break. This one will take a quick break. Let's just take a 10-minute break, come back at 11:50. So just a quick stretch, quick pee break, whatever it is that you need. Grab some more caffeine, snack. We will restart at 11:50. So a quick 10-minute break. When we come back from our break, we are going to talk about those 11 organ systems we mentioned before, talk about what their general functions are, and identify some of the the organs in them as well. So we will, and I will restart the recording at that point. All right, excellent. I will see you back here in 10 quick minutes. All righty. Last little business we need to take care of today. Let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, there are 11 organs and organ systems. So someone start rattling them off. Give me an example of one of our 11 organ systems.
Respiratory.
Excellent. Someone give me a different one.
Digestive.
Digestive. Excellent. And another.
Endocrine system.
Excellent. Keep going.
Muscular.
Excellent. What else?
Skeletal.
Say again.
Skeletal.
I'm sorry, you keep breaking up.
Reproductive.
Reproductive, okay.
I think they said skeletal.
Oh, skeletal. Okay, got it. Perfect. What else?
Nervous.
Nervous. All right. Get a state.
Lymphatic.
Perfect.
Cardiovascular.
Urinary.
And what's that leave us with?
Integumentary.
There you go, integumentary.
Yeah.
Spectacular. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right, so there you go. We have our 11 organ systems. Oh, I'm sorry. Some people were in chat. I apologize for missing that. Bring that back up again. When I switch things, sometimes these things close. Excellent. All right, didn't catch this. All right, excellent. So we've got our 11 organs and organ systems. Let's go through them and do two things. I want to identify the general functions. Again, I don't expect you to know everything about all of these because then you wouldn't have to take anatomy and physiology. But should we know the general functions and the primary organs in them? Absolutely. So for instance, respiratory. Give me an example of an organ in the respiratory system.
Lungs.
Lungs, absolutely. And at this point in this class, I expect you to just know the lungs. When we get to the respiratory system in 431, are you going to have to learn about the different lobes? Are you going to have to learn about the different bronchi and the carina and the trachea and everything else that goes along with it? Yes, absolutely. Right. But for now, just general organs, general functions is a good start. So let's talk about that for the respiratory system. What is the general function of the respiratory system?
Breathing.
Okay, absolutely. Ventilating air into and out of our lungs is an important part of it. And why do we do that?
Oxygen.
Just oxygen?
Carbon dioxide.
Yeah. Respiratory system is really about the exchange of gases, plural. Right? Both oxygen and CO2. Everybody remembers oxygen, and definitely oxygen is important. It is important to remember that. But at the same time, right, carbon dioxide in some way equally, if not more important, right? What do you do when you don't get your way? I don't want to go to school. What do you do? Everybody loves to go to school, so nobody's never done this before in their entire life.
Tantrum? Or
Okay, yeah, one could be their tantrum, or what else will a little kid do if he doesn't want to doesn't want to do something?
Pretend to be sick.
True.
breath?
How about just hold their breath, right? I don't want to go to school. Right, and they'll hold their breath, and your wife goes, tough, you have to teach today, get out of here, right? Yeah, you hold your breath. Can you hold your breath forever?
No.
No, eventually you're going to have to breathe. And guess what? You have to breathe not because you run out of oxygen. You end up breathing because you build up too much carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide actually plays a much more important role in determining the rate at which you breathe than oxygen does. So it really is plural, exchange of gases. Both oxygen and CO2 are equally important. Right now, we mentioned the lungs. Give me some of the other organs that you would find in the respiratory system. Come on, guys. These are the easy questions.
Bronchioles?
Right. Okay. The bronchi, excellent. Right. So those are
Bronchi.
inside the lungs. What else? Larynx. What else?
Trachea.
Trachea. What else? Pharynx. You guys are doing all the hard ones. What's the easy one you're missing? It's right in front of your face.
Your nasal cavity?
Yeah, how about your nose? There you go. Is your nose an organ in the respiratory system? Any others? What about the mouth?
Region.
Is the mouth an organ in the respiratory system?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Digestive.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely correct. The mouth is not an organ of the respiratory system. I know that seems weird, right? Because anybody who's ever had a cold survived it because they were able to move air into and out of their lungs with their mouth. But just because things move through it doesn't mean it's necessarily a part of it. Because after all, if I put a straw in my nose, right, and I put the other end of the straw into this cup, which again, I've been talking for 4 hours, so let's pretend it's still coffee, right? If I were to put a straw in there and put it up my nose, would I be able to get this into my belly through my nose with a straw? Yeah.
Yes.
Is it the preferred way of drinking? No, but it can go through there. So does that mean that the nose is part of the digestive system?
No.
No, of course not, right? So just because air can pass through the oral cavity does not mean that it is part of the respiratory system. Yeah, diaphragm is another great example of another organ that way as well. Excellent, but not the mouth. The mouth, as someone pointed out, is a part of the digestive system. What is the function of the digestive system?
Break down foods for nutrition, for nutrients.
Excellent. I like that as well. Too often people say to digest, right? That's like saying the building is tall because it is tall. So I like the fact that you broke that down. Absolutely, right? The point of the digestive system is to take that cheeseburger that you had for breakfast, break it down into its basic components, and draw it into the body, right? And that's really the key. We want to cross the body, get it inside of the body, right? And the digestive system's job is that. What are some of the organs in the digestive system?
Mouth.
Mouth. What else?
Esophagus.
Stomach. Esophagus.
Small intestine.
Small intestine. Large intestine. Give me at least one more.
Gallbladder.
Gallbladder. Excellent. Liver, gallbladder. Absolutely. Excellent. Excellent. All examples of great organs in our digestive system. Perfect. What's the function of the endocrine system?
The release of hormones.
Okay, for what purpose?
A variety, I would say.
Absolutely. You've got the right idea. Like what?
Like growth and
Reproduction.
reproduction, pregnancy.
Absolutely. Excellent. And so you've got the right idea, right? We can take all of that. Everything you said is absolutely true, but there's a way we can kind of encapsulate that all into one thing. Our endocrine system is one of our organ systems that is specialized for communication. Now, you are absolutely correct that communication comes in the form of hormones, right? Chemical signals that are made and spread throughout the body. Absolutely. And that allows us to coordinate long-lasting types of processes like reproduction, like growth, like development, like repair, things along those lines. Absolutely. Excellent, excellent. What are some of the organs in the endocrine system? What are some of the glands that make hormones?
Thymus.
Pituitary.
Pituitary gland, the thymus is a great example. Give me at least one or two more.
Pineal.
Pineal gland, absolutely, right, plays a role in our sleep-wake cycle. And we got one more.
Thyroid gland.
Oh, pancreas. I like pancreas. Pancreas is a good one. Someone mentioned that one. Thyroid gland is another example. Pancreas is a great example because pancreas is actually a mixed organ, right? A mixed gland. It actually has endocrine functions where it produces hormones. Anyone know one of the hormones produced in our pancreas? I know you know it, even if you don't think you know it.
Insulin.
Insulin, absolutely. Insulin is one of the big ones, absolutely. But it also produces digestive enzymes. It actually is a digestive organ as well. So many of these organs can be found in multiple systems, and the pancreas is a great example of that. Excellent, excellent, excellent. There happens to be another organ system on here that is specialized for communication. What other organ system on here is specialized for communication?
The nervous system.
There you go. Also specialized for communication. However, it doesn't communicate in the same way. How does our nervous system communicate?
Electro.
Neurons.
Well, neurons are the cells. You've got the right idea, but those neurons produce an electrical signal.
Neurotransmitters.
They also release neurotransmitters, those chemicals that allow them to communicate to their target cells. Absolutely. Anybody know the fancy term we have for the big electrical signal that our neurons produce?
Receptors.
Well, the receptors receive that neurotransmitter that's released, but the big electrical signal that is produced is called an action potential. I don't know if you've ever heard that term before. Don't worry if you haven't, we will get to it when we get to the nervous system. Produces an action potential. And you guys have kind of already hit on it. the organs of the nervous system, our brain, spinal cord, those nerves, those neurons, things along those lines. So we have two systems here specialized for communication. What's the difference? The biggest difference? You guys are overthinking this. What do you think the biggest difference between endocrine system and the nervous system is?
Endocrine is automatic.
Well, you could argue the nervous is automatic. Like I said, if I touch something hot, right, I pull away before I consciously make that decision, right?
One is more responsive than the other.
Well, again, if there's a loud bang behind you and you release a lot of adrenaline, right, as a result of that, your heart rate is going to race for that. Your eyes are going to dilate. You can get very specific responses that way. But here's the other thing. That car backfires outside and you jump out of your skin as a result of it because you're scared. Pretty quickly, you realize that it was just a car backfiring and everything is okay. However, does your heart rate instantly go back to normal after that?
Sensor?
No, it stays elevated for a little bit longer period of time, right? Samuel's got it. The big difference between the nervous system and the endocrine system is speed, right? Think about it. If I put my hand on something hot and the cells, when they were damaged, had to produce a chemical signal that they released into the interstitial fluid that got into the blood. And then once it got into the blood, it was transported throughout the body till it finally got to my brain, where my brain received that chemical signal and then had to produce its own chemical signal, which it released into the interstitial fluid that got into the blood and circulate throughout the body before it finally got back to my hand to pull my hand away. Well, by the time all of that happened, my hand would have burned off already. However, thankfully, I have a nervous system. So when I touch something hot, that reflex tells me to pull my hand away before I'm even aware of the fact I should be cursing. The big difference between these are speed. Nervous system allows for fast, rapid responses. Our hormones allow for longer lasting signals. So for things that take a longer period of time, like development, like growth, like reproduction, things along those lines. Excellent, excellent, excellent. All right. The function of our muscular system.
Support.
Yeah, support, movement, absolutely, right? And I like that too. Movement is the obvious thing, right? Being able to wave my hand back and forth. That support, that structure, that balance is something that we take for granted until it's disrupted, right? By the time I finish this cup of Jägermeister, right? Am I necessarily going to be able to stand with my eyes closed and held myself in one position?
Not for long.
Not for long, absolutely, right? There are all these little micro contractions that are taking place with our muscles to give us our balance, to allow us to stand upright, right? And it isn't until something disrupts that we start to appreciate and understand how challenging that actually can be. Of course, these muscles only work because they have some levers to pull on. And what are the levers that this muscle works on?
Skeletal.
Yeah, the skeletal is what gives us our structure, gives us our support, right? Yes, some protection, like our brain, like our heart, but how many bones do you have in your hand?
36.
Really? No, actually, it's
That
not.
was a random guess.
Oh, that was a good guess. It's a lot. We'll figure out the numbers later, but it absolutely is a lot. Are any of them providing any protection? Any of the bones inside my hand providing protection? These are the easy questions, folks.
No.
I can slam it in the door because the bones are going to protect me? No, of course not,
No.
Right? What they do is they provide structure, they provide support, they provide the levers that those muscles can pull on. Back in ancient times, and of course by ancient times I mean the 1980s, there was a famous cartoonist, right? And that cartoonist did a series called The Far Side. And my favorite Far Side is this one right here. Gary Larson did The Far Side, and this was his boneless chicken ranch. Notice without the skeletal system, all the chickens were just draped over fences or lying over the signs because they didn't have those bones. They didn't have that structure. They didn't have that support, right? These are indeed organ systems. That means they are made up of organs. And how many organs do we have in the skeletal system? What are the organs of the skeletal system?
The bones.
Bones, excellent. And how many bones do you have?
216.
Close, 206.
206.
Named bones, right? And guess how many of those you're gonna have to learn?
206.
All 206 of them, absolutely. It's the
Hey, I
same.
have a question.
Yes.
So you said it's only 206 named bones.
Yep.
So how many total bones are there? Or is it like too much to count?
No, I love that you asked that question. So if a few people catch that, you are 100% absolutely correct. Every single person in this class has far more than 206 bones in their body. However, many of the bones that you have are tiny little bones found in weird locations that everybody has a different number of. So you have dozens of different bones from the person next to you, tiny little bones that are different from one person to the next. And because they differ from one person to the next, there isn't just a single count that everybody has. And we can't give them names because you may have 3 up here in your skull in this suture, and I may have 2 here, and then 1 in my wrist, and you might have 3 over here in this wrist, and they can vary from person to person. So the one thing—
So it's just 206 that everybody has the same of?
Yeah, there are 206 bones that everybody has consistently, and so because they're consistent in everybody, we give them names. So you are absolutely correct. So 206 named bones. Excellent. Bring it back to muscles. If bones are organs, then are muscles organs as well?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, they're made of muscle tissue, but they also have nerves in them and connective tissues in them and blood vessels in them and all sorts of other things in there as well. Anybody know how many named muscles we have in the body?
142.
You wish. There are over 600 named muscles in the body. Now, the good news is you won't have to learn all of those. Only about 520. No, I'm just kidding. You won't even have to know that many. No, but much, much more. But yeah, all of those muscles like the bicep brachia, the bicularis, right, masseter, all of these named muscles of the body. There's over 600 muscles in the body, and they are indeed the organs. All right, there you go. We went skeletal, we went muscular, we skipped reproductive. What is the function of the reproductive system?
Create life.
Yeah, produce offspring, absolutely. Propagate the species. Excellent, excellent. Great way to think of it, right? Not to reproduce. Building is not tall because it is tall. What are the primary organs of the reproductive system?
Ovaries.
Excellent, excellent. See, I'm so glad you said that. Too often, everybody gets deadly quiet when I ask this question because everybody's terrified to say vagina and penis. Now, I will remind you, A, this is an anatomy and physiology class. You're allowed to say penis and vagina. However, as was pointed out, that's not the right answer. Absolutely, the primary organs of the reproductive system are what we collectively call the gonads. Those mean the ovaries in a girl type person, and in a boy type person, what does that mean?
Testicles.
Testicles, absolutely. The testes, absolutely. Yes, the penis and the vagina are important copulatory organs, right, to bring the puzzle pieces that the ovaries and the testes make, right? That's at least how we explained it to my daughter, right? Mommy and daddy make puzzle pieces, put those puzzle pieces together, and they make a person, right? So absolutely, those gonads making the eggs, making the sperm, are the primary organs, but there are others like the penis and the vagina and the scrotum and the labia and all the other things that go along with that as well. Notice also the gonads are another example of one of those organs that can be found in multiple systems. Because while the ovaries make the eggs, they also make the estrogens, the progestins. While the testes make the sperm, it also makes the androgens, right? The testosterone. So we have all of those. Again, it's another example of a good organ that is found in numerous systems. And again, it's a pretty straightforward one. I think one that's a little trickier is the lymphatic. What is the function of the lymphatic system? Anybody know?
Doesn't it have something to do with like fluids?
You are absolutely correct. So the lymphatic system and the cardiovascular system kind of work hand in hand. What is our cardiovascular system involved in? What's its function?
The transport of blood throughout your
Oh,
body.
I love that. Transportation, absolutely. Its function is transportation. And you are correct. Those things that are transported by the blood. What kind of things are transported by the blood?
Red blood cells, white blood cells.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so those, what else? Oxygen, there you go. That carbon dioxide we talked about. What else?
Hemoglobin. Hemoglobin.
Hemoglobin's in the red blood cells, which is what transports the oxygen, nutrients, wastes, those hormones that we talked about, right? All of those are things that are transported throughout the body, right? Our cells are interdependent on each other. So they can't necessarily get the oxygen or the nutrients they need from the environment. So our cardiovascular system delivers it to them. And that exchange takes place in a capillary. And it turns out those capillaries are pretty leaky. During the course of the day, about 2 liters of fluid leak out of your capillaries, leak out of your cardiovascular system. Anybody know how much blood you have in you?
I want to say 5 liters.
Yeah, between 5 and 6 liters, absolutely. So do you think you have 2 liters of spare fluid you can afford to just leak out of your cardiovascular system? No, but it happens. And so thankfully, our lymphatic system's job is to collect that excess fluid and bring it and deposit it back into the cardiovascular system. And does it just close its eyes and do it randomly, just take a scoop and dump it in?
No.
No, it also processes it and filters it as well, right? Our lymphatic system transports those fluids, helps to put that fluid back into the cardiovascular system, but it also examines the fluid, examines the cells, and is the primary location where our immune response takes place. This is where, again, I'm sitting down, so it's not as easy to do, but normally I get up on my soapbox right now. Notice we have 11 organ systems, and immune isn't one of them. You do not have an immune system, right? Systems are made up of individual organs. What you have is an immune response, chemical and cellular interactions that take place in your body, providing that vital protection. And a lot of that immune response takes place within the lymphatic tissues. So it's responsible for that transportation of fluid back into the cardiovascular system, but it also provides our immune response.
That's why when you're sick, your lymph system in your jaw gets all puffy and hurts.
So absolutely. When I was just going to mention that, some of the lymphatic organs include your lymph nodes, include your tonsils, right? And when you're infected, these things become enlarged because they're making the cells, they're making the chemicals that are providing that protection. So they get swollen, you get that pain, you get that discomfort, right, from that process. And we skipped it, but it should be pretty easy. What are some of the organs in the cardiovascular system?
Heart.
Heart, what
Veins.
else? Veins,
Arteries,
and then those capillaries.
Capillaries.
Excellent. All right, questions on any of that? All right, 2 more. Let's talk about the worst name of all of our organ systems. The urinary system must be vitally important for producing urine, right? Is that the vitally important function that your urinary system does?
No.
No. What is it that the urinary system does that is absolutely positively vital for your function?
Expelling waste.
From what?
Water.
Bladder,
Yeah,
or kidneys.
absolutely. It filters the blood. And where that occurs is indeed your kidneys, right? One of the important things to learn in biology, and if you've taken any biology classes, you've probably already learned this, is that life for the most part is pretty lazy. Once it figures out a simple way of doing things, it's going to stick with that until it has to change. It's not about optimizing and making things as efficient as possible. It's just about getting by, right? Respiratory system. How many lungs do you have?
2.
2. If you lost one, would you survive?
Nope.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you could survive with one lung, right? If you had a lung get damaged, had to be removed because of cancer, right? Had it stolen on a Friday night when you passed out at a bar, you could survive with just one lung, right? Would you be able to be a professional athlete? You know, at the active at your peak levels? No, of course not, but you would survive, right? Things along those lines. So again, yes, it's important we have it, but we could survive with only one. But what about kidneys? You have 2 kidneys. If you lost one of those, sold it on eBay, would you be able to survive?
Yeah.
Yeah. Would you be able to be a professional athlete?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. A single kidney is capable of doing all of the filtering that is necessary in your body. It is a huge redundancy. You could, like I said, lose a kidney, sell it on eBay, donate it to your grandmother, and you will survive perfectly. Yes, you would still be able to efficiently be a professional athlete. Now, you wouldn't necessarily want to be one, because if you were that running back who then got tackled and damaged your second kidney, and you've already given one up, right? How long can you survive with no kidneys?
Not long without
Yeah.
dialysis.
Well, even with that, you're absolutely right. You would survive a couple days tops, right? Yes, with dialysis, we can prolong that, but is dialysis a cure for kidney failure? No, it is a short-term stopgap until you can get a replacement kidney. And again, you only need one. It's that, vitally important. So yes, so tremendous redundancy. That process of filtering the blood is hugely, massively important. Of course, we call it the urinary system because it's easier. We don't see the filtering of the blood, even though it's happening constantly, right? But what we do see is the waste product of that process, right? The urinary system, the urine that is produced. And in fact, this process is so vitally important. If you're not feeling well, if there's something wrong with you, what's one of the first things the doctor has you do?
Pee in a cup.
Yeah, you pee in a cup, absolutely, because you pee in a cup so that they can look at what's coming out of you. It tells them something about what's going on inside of you. All right, so obviously the kidneys are the major organ. Give me another organ in the urinary system.
Your liver.
Yeah, the urethra, the bladder,
Bladder.
all of those. Yep, absolutely. Excellent, excellent. All right, and last but not least, integumentary system. It's a big fancy word, but it's a big fancy word that basically means what?
Our skin.
Yeah, it's your skin, absolutely. Your integument is your skin. Your skin is your integument. And so what is the function of the integumentary system?
Protect.
Yeah, protection. Form a barrier between you and the outside world, right? Helps us regulate temperature, do all sorts of important stuff as well. Now, is it a completely impenetrable barrier?
No.
No, of course not, right? If you have to take some kind of medications or you're trying to stop smoking, how can you do that?
You put a patch.
Yeah, you put a patch, and that patch allows lipid-soluble medications to be absorbed into your body. I'm sure this has never happened to anybody in this class, but believe it or not, there's some individuals who will partake of alcohol to excess. And typically when that happens, the next day they may be feeling a little guilty, so they get on the treadmill, and as they're running on the treadmill and start to sweat, or as they're just hunched over in the bathroom the next morning and all sweaty, can you tell that they've been drinking because of the alcohol that is just radiating out of their body? Absolutely. Like I said, I know that's never happened to any of you, but maybe instead of going out and being excessive in the at the bar, maybe instead, because you were feeling happy that things are starting to open out, you went to Buca di Beppo and had their 30 garlic chicken, right? Again, probably feeling guilty the next day on the treadmill. And after eating that 30 garlic chicken, once you start to sweat, you can actually smell that garlic again, just radiating out of your pores from that. So while it is an important barrier, it does allow some things in and some things out. Excellent. And of course, we have our skin. Any other organs or accessory structures to the skin?
Question, when you put it in quotation marks, is there a reason why?
Nope, absolutely not.
Nails.
Only in
Would hair be a part of that?
I'm sorry?
Would hair be a part of that?
Yeah, hair, nails, glands, all of those things would be additional organs or structures associated with the integumentary system. Excellent, 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 excellent. So again, we went through this ourselves. Your book actually has a nice figure, a nice illustration. I think it's figure 1.3 that again talks about the 11 organ systems, identifies the primary organs in those, and that is information you are responsible for on the exam. All right, questions on any of that? All right. That is everything that I wanted to talk about for today. Well, it's not everything because again, we never got a chance to finish our orientation, but we will definitely do that. But that is everything that I'm going to say for today. So we get to finish a little bit early, which is nice. Our goal, again, make sure after class today. So 2 things to remember. Your chemistry quiz should be available starting at 12:35 or 12:45, whatever it is. It must be completed by 8 a.m. tomorrow, so please complete that ahead of time. We will have an attendance quiz tomorrow as well, so make sure you're here on time for that. Again, if you are on the wait list and you're here, make sure you email me so I can send you the permission to add number. Use that today so that tomorrow morning when the computer updates at 6, I show that you're in the roster, and then remember to pay. Complete all the other activities, the lab handouts, all those things. And if you haven't done so already, I have 5 for 5 appointments that you can do to come and meet with me, ask any questions that you have, and get your 5 points of extra credit for participating in that. All right, I think that is everything that is important. Any questions on any of that or anything else that we've talked about today?
Hi, earlier someone posted in the chat about the lab manual. I don't know which website they found it in, but they said that they rented it.
That was
and
me.
they were able.
Vital Source.
Vital Source.
Vital Source is one of the ones that can do that, and Chegg is another one that I know a lot of students have had. However, the thing you have to be careful with Chegg, and again, I don't know, I'm not as familiar with Vital Source, so you're welcome to use any of these resources. But what I will warn you about with Chegg is Chegg has different levels of renting, and the cheapest one does not allow you to print out the pages. And again, this lab manual is a workbook. You are going to be required to print out the pages, complete the pages, or scan the pages, fill them out, label them, do all those kind of things, and turn them in. So make sure it doesn't do you any good to look at these things if you can't fill out the activities and turn them in. So make sure you get an option that allows you to do that. All right. The other thing that I will remind you is this is a 2-semester class. Although here's the other thing. So it is a 2-semester class. If you are already signed up for me in the fall, I will be using this lab manual. All of these resources you're purchasing now or renting now are going to be the exact same ones that I'll be using next semester as well. Now, the one thing you have to worry about is starting in the fall, a decision was made over the summer that we are no longer going to have a single prep for this class. So the instructors are going to have the option, if they want to switch to a different textbook, that they will have the option of doing that. So that could mean a different electronic learning medium. It could mean a different textbook. It could also mean a different lab manual. So if you're signed up with somebody else, you might want to check with them to see if they use the same lab manual or a different one. If it's the same one, then you're going to have to pay for 2 semesters of it, which is practically the same price as buying the textbook in the bundle. And again, as you mentioned, you also get the really excellent Histology Atlas. But I know it's a little bit confusing because there's so many options, because I don't care how you get the materials. I don't get a kickback from any of the publishers for every one of the bundles you guys buy. So I am all about being efficient in this. But what I like about the bundles is they have the resources that I think will help you to be successful. But if you're on a budget and want to streamline these things, then find the option that works best for you. There are lots of options available to you. Find the one that works best for you, but allows you to be successful in the class. It doesn't do you any good to save $30 if you end up with a B in a class instead of an A, because you don't have the resources to help you to be successful. And remember, this is a 2-semester class, so you do have to be thinking about that too when it comes to the resources. All right. So again, I've tried to give as many options available to you. Those things are listed out in the syllabus. We talked about it at the beginning of class, so you can always go back and check that on the lecture once it gets posted. Although, like I said, it may be a day or two before that gets up. So I try to get them done the first day, but sometimes it takes Zoom a while to compile it. Then once it's compiled, I have to upload it to YouTube, which takes a while. Once I upload it to YouTube, it takes them a while to process it before it's available online. So it's not a fast process. So that's what I said. It's not an alternative to coming here, but it's a great resource to help you to master the material by being a chance to go back and look at it. Because look, obviously I don't expect your 100% attention for a whole 4.5 hours that I'm sitting here talking, right? It is perfectly understandable that people will zone out for a while. Or like I said, we're all at home, so there's plenty of distractions and other things to bother us as well. So that's why I try to make these resources available to help you to go back and review or catch something that you've missed. But it's not an alternative to come into class. All right. Any other questions? Those are some great ones. Any more?
Yeah, I had a question.
Yes.
So when completing the lab assignments,
yes,
is it okay to take a picture of the finished pages and then upload those?
Yes, absolutely. So you can either, if you have a scanner, you can scan them and do it that way, but just taking a picture of them and submitting the pictures is fine as well. Basically, the way you would do that here, let's, oh, I closed it already, so hold on. Give me a second and I can get it back up again. So, like I said, when you go to the modules, for instance, if you're turning in Unit 1 review, you'll click on that. You'll start the assignment. And notice here is where you'll upload the files. Now, if you have scanned it and put it together into one PDF, or you can take the images and put them together in one PDF, then you can just upload that one PDF. Or what you can do is, if you have 5 pages, there are 5 pictures that you've taken, then you have those 5 images that you can do it one at a time that way as well. Oh, cool. What does TurboScan do? I'm not familiar with that one.
It's amazing. I use it all the time for everything, but it just takes photos of anything you're trying to scan, but it looks like a scanner quality.
Cool. Does it compile it all into one file?
Yeah. Yeah. You can add pages and then you just email it to yourself.
Perfect. So that sounds like a great way to do that. Again, that's convenient. It's more convenient for me when you put it together, but if it's too many hoops to jump through, then if you want to take, it's 5 pages and you want to take 5 pictures and you want to upload those 5 pictures, you're welcome to do that as well. Yeah, again, there's Notes works and iPhone. There's lots of ways to do it, but you don't even have to do that if you don't want to. You can just take those pictures with your phone and upload them this way. You can do this. There is a Canvas app for students, which allows you to access the assignments, and you can do things that way as well. So absolutely. So take advantage of that, submit that. Again, you can put comments in here, but remember, as I said, the nice thing about this is that because you're logged onto Canvas, when you submit it, it puts it specifically in a folder to me from you. So I know who sent all of them. So you don't necessarily have to worry about putting your name on it or saying anything here or anything along those lines. Also, you don't have to submit them all at once as well. If once you submit the assignment, I'll say it's not going to let me do that. But once you've uploaded some images, if you want to add more to it later, you can come back and submit again. So it keeps all of the previous ones. You don't erase the first one by doing the second one. So it's all there that I have access to. So yeah, I try to make it as easy as possible, and we get to save trees, and I don't have to worry about it in my email or anything along those lines. So yeah, absolutely, pictures are fine, or use any of these other things to put them together into a single PDF. That would be fine as well. Any of those things are good options. Excellent. Great questions. Any more?
So lab manual we need for our assignments, right?
Yes. So those unit reviews are all going to be out of your lab manual. Again, it is the 3rd edition of the Ammerman. This is the teacher version. So mine is bound. Yours is loose bound if you purchase it in the bundle. So it's a loose leaf, which makes it really easy to scan and to complete. But yeah, what I like about it is it's like a workbook. So those first assignments are, the first one is due on Thursday, but as I said, I heard last week from people that the bookstore was a little back ordered on them. So I will give you some flexibility till next week, so you can still turn it in up to next week without it being considered late. But again, because of the fast pace of this, you need to get these things and you need to get them yesterday. Like I said, if someone has it and wants to post the first one on the discussion board, again, I cannot condone that because again, these things are copyrighted, but I would look the other way on that if someone was interested in doing that, but that's fine as well. You can get it lots of other ways as well. All right. But yeah, that's one of the 3 main resources you must have. And like I said, I'm not as worried about the textbook because with the MyLab and Mastering, everybody should get a free 2-week trial, and that free 2-week trial includes the electronic version of the textbook. So you should have all those resources if you're waiting to get the bundle, or you can purchase it directly from them as well. All right. Excellent. Any more questions? All righty, excellent. So we will, tomorrow, we are going to finish the rest of our introduction. Hopefully I'll be able to get on a Master AMP and show you a couple of quick things that I want to do, but you should be exploring that already. Especially since your intro is due on Thursday. So let's take a look at that if you haven't already. And we're going to start building our way up that hierarchy. We are going to start at our first level and start with the chemistry. So make sure you take that chemistry quiz today between now and 8 a.m. tomorrow. All right. Any other questions? All right, excellent. If you're on the wait list, make sure you email me your student ID so that I can send you the permission to add number and we can get you officially into the class. All right, guys, welcome to summer school. I will see you tomorrow.
I